Welcome back to another episode of Flight Chat, the listener feedback show for the Flight Cast. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's get right to it. For this particular feedback session, got a couple of weeks of emails, not a ton, but just a little bit to get through. We'll start with John. He's got a handful of emails to start us off this particular week. He starts us off with an email called Questions and Solace, which he sent back on the 17th. And he says, I will always take solace on the fact that no online film debates have ever had more passionate arguments than arguing about the quality of films Zack Snyder makes. Yeah, you're not kidding. Sure, some say he's not worth talking about, yet they take the time to write about him. You're right, they do live rent-free. Honestly, I've stopped over-personalizing what people say about his films or him. If people write about how much they don't care about the guy, then obviously they do care. That is true. I've never seen a director defended and scathed on this level. People can say what they want about him, but the reality is Snyder is an anomaly. He will never go away. Discussions about him will never go away. People will still debate the quality of either version of Batman v Superman for the next 50 to 60 years, maybe longer. It's like what the Joker said to Batman, I think we're destined to do this forever. Ah yes, from The Dark Knight. People can compare him to Michael Bay, John says, all the livelong day. Even say Bay is better. But I've never seen a passionate defense of Transformers or anything else he's made. As you've said, people like a good cheeseburger once in a while. I think of Snyder like a McRib. People either love the taste or think it's a nasty sandwich. Although someone said he's like a spicy food director. Spicy isn't for everyone, but people who love it are absolutely loving it. McDonald's jingle. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Yeah, you know, okay, I will say this, John. I'm definitely calling Snyder more than a McRib. Because here's the thing, when I made that comment about, Michael Bay with respect to, cheeseburger movies, that's, from the subjective standpoint of Michael Bay being a cheeseburger director, right? I've said for years he has one speed of directing. Pretty. His movies don't necessarily have the best writing, the best, character development, or the deepest plots, truthfully, right? But I've enjoyed just about everything that he's done. And I know that he's, a very difficult director to work with, I've heard from a number of people, but I love what he did with the first two Bad Boys movies, which are still the only two that I have seen to this point. I enjoyed the Transformers films. I own the Transformers films. I enjoyed The Island. There's a number of Michael Bay film movies that I have definitely personally enjoyed, but they're really about visual spectacles. They're not a whole lot about anything else with story or character development or anything like that. And I do believe that Zack Snyder's films do go deeper into character development and subject matter and, subtext and symbolism. I do think there is a lot more substance in Zack Snyder's films in that regard. And I feel like a lot of his detractors, a lot of the people whose heads he lives in rent-free, ignore that. And the reason they ignore it and they dismiss it is because they don't like his style. And they're so offended by his style because of what he did with Superman that they are willing to just dismiss any and everything he does and just, in favor of, harping on the slow-mo, harping on the VFX and the visuals and all that. Like, and so that's why they compare him to Michael Bay, because they want to blatantly ignore the subtext that he does put in his movies and his scripts. That he does have people like Chris Terrio write into the scripts, right? They dismiss all of that. So that's why I'm going to call Zack Snyder, subjectively speaking, much more than a McRib, right? Like what's high-end fast food, right? What's a fast food product that is he a Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich? Political believings aside, political leanings and whatnot aside on Chick-fil-A, right? I don't support any of what they do politically, obviously. But if we're talking about like creme de la creme of like, drive-in, what? Here's a better one. How about Culver's? Anybody hear of Culver's, right? One of their butter burgers, one of their fish sandwiches, right? Higher end type of drive-thru, right? If we're making the McDonald's comparison, I think Zack Snyder is definitely higher than that. He's an auteur. Zack Snyder is most certainly an auteur. I don't know that Michael Bay is necessarily an auteur, especially since a great deal of his style was nerfed from Tony Scott, to be honest with you. I still think that he owes his career to Tony Scott, and I'm not knocking him for it. I do think Tony Scott was the better action director, subjectively speaking, but I'm just saying, I think there's a lot more to elevate Snyder's craft and his filmmaking, right? But I do agree with the rest of what you're saying, is that the debate's never going to go away because he's always going to live rent-free in the haters' heads. They're never going to forgive him for what he did to Superman and how this happened and how he trashed the Justice League and all that. They're never going to forgive him for that. And as long as there are people that ardently enjoy his films and defend his films, there's always going to be haters. There's always going to be people that trash his films. And the nature of it, it's not just in terms of him existing as a filmmaker and what he did. It's also in terms of the timing, right? The social media timing, right? The rise to the Twitter bullshit and the Facebook bullshit and the, now Threads and Instagram and all that, right? And YouTube, of course. The rise of these people grifting and coming up with YouTube channels to spew their hatred and their bile just for the sake of making money. Like, there's people making money on their hatred of Zack Snyder, whether they actually hate the man like that or not. And so the rise of this, the timing of that's what makes all of this relevant, and that's why it's going to stick around for a long time, because there's something there on either side, whether you like his work or not, right? So that's where the staying power comes from, and he's not going to quit making movies. He's going to be one of those like Scorsese, right? He's going to keep making movies until he can't make movies anymore, to be honest with you. That's what he loves to do. He has a passion for that. That's why he's a fantastic auteur. That's why he absolutely belongs in the category of people like Chris Nolan and even the Scorseses and otherwise. And I know that there's some film elitists out there that will absolutely bridle at that and be like, how dare you put his name in that category? Deal with it, because it's how I feel, and you're welcome to disagree with me as long and as much as you damn well wish to, but you'll be the one with the problem, not me, and I will be happier than you. Anyone that wishes to be so upset and offended by that. Why are we so offended by subjective movie taste? Like, what the hell is that about, right? There's no reason to be offended by a different interpretation of Superman or a different interpretation of your favorite DC Comics characters or Marvel Comics or whatever it is. There's no reason to be offended. What the hell is wrong with people? Entitlement at its best, of course, without a doubt. But, you've taken the right tack with this, John, in terms of not over-personalizing what people say about him or his films, because it's all the same noise, and it's just a broken record for the past 8 years plus, and it's never going to go away. They're always going to live he's always going to live rent-free in their heads for as long as they're on this earth, for as long as they have energy and effort to complain about it. So let them be miserable. That's their business. All right, on to your questions from this particular email. This first one, John, you had 3 questions for this one. First, you said, the monologue about Solace is in relation to Mark Waid's comments. Oh, yes, that's right, because it was a week or so ago that Mark Waid decided to open his mouth with respect to, praising James Gunn's Superman and saying, well, it's not going to be another Zack Snyder, that type of deal. That absolute babying foolishness. But John says, one of the things that makes Snyder a heated discussion are the high-profile people that praise him and the high-profile people that crap on him. Who's the most famous Snyder defender and who's the most famous hater? I want to say Kevin Smith, but maybe there's someone bigger? Joe Rogan, maybe? James Cameron has gone on to say Snyder's been an influence. The Russos praised him. Gunn praised him. I would say perhaps Patton Oswalt might be his most famous critic. Michelle Wolf is critical. Conan O'Brien's made jokes. Am I missing anyone? Yeah, John, you're missing a very big person, arguably the highest profile director that is a Zack Snyder defender, and I've already mentioned his name, and that's Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan 100% is a Zack Snyder defender. He's even quoted in the article, the big Anthony Breznican piece from Vanity Fair, the big Snyder cut expose that was written a little bit before the movie released on Max a couple of years ago, right? Like, he was the one that said, after watching Justice League, my friend, you can never watch this movie, right? Like, Christopher Nolan, went to bat for him with Man of Steel. Christopher Nolan is a Zack Snyder defender. I would say he is the highest profile, certainly in our circles, to be honest with you, because I know that most of us consider Christopher Nolan to be a superior film director to Kevin Smith, superior talent in that regard, and definitely bigger than Joe Rogan and James Cameron, any of that. No, Joe Rogan, that's a disgusting name. But at any rate, I know the Russos and Gunn definitely are on his side for sure. But yeah, Christopher Nolan. I think Christopher Nolan is absolutely his biggest defender at this point to date, to be honest with you. As far as his most famous critic, I don't know and don't care, to be honest with you. I mean, Patton Oswalt, Michelle Wolf, Conan O'Brien, whatever. They can say whatever the hell they want. I don't give a shit. I'm not interested in who his biggest critic is. I think they're all babies. And I think they're all whiny, crying little fools that, can say whatever they want and can continue to cry and complain about his work as much as they want, and they'll be the ones with the problem, like I said before. So I couldn't care less who his biggest critic is. But I would definitely say Christopher Nolan is his biggest defender. No doubt about that. The second question, this is an interesting one. He says, So, the Oz-Cobb debate. Yeah, I'm with you. It really shouldn't be a big deal. The only thing I question is what is Oz short for? If not Oswald, maybe Oswin? I always like that name, Oswin. Well, and John actually wrote a reply email to this, an update, because he obviously wrote this. He wrote this on the 17th, which was 2 days before the premiere of the Penguin episode. Those of us that have watched the Penguin premiere, whether you've watched it or not, I can officially confirm for you that it's Oswald. Because he's called Oswald about 5 or 6 times in that first episode. His mom calls him Oswald. Sophia calls him Oswald. Sophia's brother calls him Oswald. He is Oswald Cobb. That is his name. So it's still Oswald in that regard, right? So I said this in our DCTV Squadcast episode review of the first Penguin episode that we did last week. I said, all the people caterwauling about that, the whole Oz Cobb name, shut up. Just seriously, just shut the hell up, okay? His name is Oswald. Seriously, get your heads out of your ass as far as that is concerned. Not you, John, but I'm just saying all the people that made this massive deal out of it, he's still Oswald, and it's all over the show. So whatever. It is what it is. On to the third question John's got for this first email. He says, I've been getting YouTube video recommendations called Last Meals, where people eat their own hypothetical last meal, or display a famous person's last meal. What's your last meal? Mine would be something along the lines of all the fast food chains on the table, akin to Dr. Dolittle 2 and Talladega Nights. A bucket of KFC, dark meat, both original and crispy, with coleslaw and biscuits, a 2-liter bottle of Mountain Dew, McDonald's large fries and a Big Mac, an In-N-Out hamburger, Panda Express with orange chicken, teriyaki chicken, chow mein, and steamed rice, lettuce wrapped tuna with celery and onion bits, cheddar cubes on a toothpick, and a Costco cheese pizza pie. That's a lot. You're going to eat all that? I mean, I guess it's your last meal, so I guess you are going to eat all of that if you can. But he also added an extra email here. He said a bonus last meal dessert, a giant pint of Cold Stone birthday bake. Okay, so ice cream for sure. You know what? As far as the last meal, I mean, that's always kind of a morbid question, I feel like, because it's your last meal. It's the last one you're ever going to have. Honestly, I tell you what, my last meal, if I had to choose a last meal, would be a steak Maui with smashed potatoes and a Caesar salad on the side, rather, from J. Alexander's. J. Alexander's, if you are not familiar with that particular restaurant, Google it. They have 3 or 4 locations in Michigan. Actually, they have 3. They have one in Orchard Lake / West Bloomfield. They have one in Livonia, and they have another one in Troy inside the Somerset Mall. And I enjoyed all of them, whichever ones that I go to. But yeah, like that's an awesome particular. Google that steak Maui. It's basically an 8-ounce, not a ribeye, but it's an 8-ounce steak that is seared with this Hawaiian mix of juices, like this Hawaiian glaze, if you will, and it's absolutely divine and utterly delicious. And truthfully, it's the only time I'll ever eat pineapple, because pineapple is clearly one of the seasonings in it, and I am not a pineapple fan otherwise. I do not like pineapple on pizza or pineapple in general as a fruit, because I'm also not a fan of fruit, to be honest with you. But yeah, like that's probably my last meal, a steak Maui dinner with smashed potatoes. Let's see, do I want a beverage? Probably Sam Adams Cherry Wheat, because that's like my favorite beer, to be honest with you, my favorite regular beer to have. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily gorge myself on like a ton of different foods, if you will, but I definitely, that would be, I think, a good last meal for me in that regard, certainly. And I would enjoy and savor it as much as I could, since it would be the last meal that I would be enjoying. All right, enough of thinking about that. Let's move on to John's second email that he sent just a couple of days ago. Actually, pardon me, no, he sent this a week ago. My bad, I'm looking at the wrong calendar. He sent this a couple of days after he sent his questions and solace email. This one is called #It's all subjective, but what makes a film the worst ever, in my humble opinion? All right. He says, so I don't want to give validity to the trolls, but I feel like I should share my thoughts on something that, while subjective, makes sense to me. He says, I've been taken aback by the people who call Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice the worst film ever made. It's their opinion. I can disagree with it, but I can't help but be fascinated by this phenomenon. Even as someone who vastly preferred the Ultimate Edition, I still watch the theatrical version 6 times in theaters. It's true we all have different ways to perceive things as to what is and isn't entertaining. But by the same token, I don't believe you can find something the worst just because you didn't like the characterization of comic book superheroes that you love. Or perhaps they could be someone who isn't obsessed with multimedia adaptations of Batman or Superman and just thought it was the worst film ever in its own right. Does that mean you've seen every movie ever? Hollywood has been making movies for over a century now, and out of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, you decided that this is the lowest Hollywood would ever get? I just don't see it. Again, I'm not trying to give credibility to trolls, but I have seen alleged average moviegoers share this sentiment too. Granted, John says, 99.9% of the planet hasn't seen every single movie ever made, so maybe the worst film ever over the last 30 years? Even then I'd disagree, but it'd be far less hyperbolic. But let's say that they are genuine with their opinion, he says. I'll use a movie that I would consider a contender as one of the worst movies ever made. Freddy Got Fingered. I will 1000% agree with you on that, John. Let's continue. He says, while I haven't seen the film in its entirety, neither have I, I've seen enough of it to make the case that I would take BVS theatrical over it any day. Yeah, I got 20 minutes into that movie and very gracefully bowed out. I turned the shit off. I could not go any further, and I never wish to even attempt to go any further, to be honest with you. But John says there is a following for that film. He's right. And sure, some people have made several defenses on its behalf. People say Tom Green made it as a middle finger to Hollywood, and it intentionally used shock humor as a form of neo-surrealism. That's fine and all, and if that was Green's intention, I respect the principle. But the problem I have with this perspective is Green hasn't done anything to follow this up with. He didn't become the next Ed Wood. He seems like a nice guy, based on videos I've seen of his, but the dude was trying to be some Frankenstein hybrid of Andy Kaufman and the guys who made the Jackass films. There's an audience for it. But if an average filmgoer says that Freddy Got Fingered is better than BVS, then I have a hard time believing that they are an average moviegoer. Average moviegoers don't interpret things like that, and again, this is all just my opinion. I'm sure a troll somewhere thinks Tom Green's a better filmmaker than Zack Snyder, and that's okay. If pleasuring an elephant or biting a baby's umbilical cord is more entertaining than the deconstruction and rehabilitation of some of the best superheroes ever created, then by all means. I just can't be friends with those people. I take that back. I can be friends with him, in theory, but I just would never watch movies with them. I would avoid watching any form of on-screen entertainment with them like the plague, because the whole premise of a person who actually has that take on these two films would be beyond my comprehension. Hell, I would rather watch every superhero film ever made, every single one of them, even The Spirit, than ever spend 2 hours of my life watching Freddy Got Fingered. Well, John, I will 1000% agree with you on that. Freddy Got Fingered is absolute trash. It is horrible, and I don't like, I don't like talking about things that I don't like, but you brought it up here, and it's like, no. That when people tell me that any superhero film, whether it's Batman v Superman, whether it's, the Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn, or Black Panther Wakanda Forever, or the Marvels, when they tell me that any comic book movie they've seen in the shared cinematic universe era is the worst comic book movie they've ever seen, or the worst movie that's ever been made, then they're either a child or they're someone who has seen very few movies in their life. Because for me, I can't even call any of those. There's no movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that's counting the Taika Waititi Thor films, it's counting Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. There is no movie in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, all 34 films that it has made to date, that is the worst comic book movie ever made. There isn't. And there's also no movie in the DC Extended Universe, all 15 of those films, that is the worst comic book movie ever made. None of them. Absolutely none of them. You want to know movies that are worse than Taika Waititi's Thor movies, or the Studio Squad, the mangled version of David Ayer's Suicide Squad? You want to know some movies that are worse than that? Here, how's this? Howard the Duck. And I know as I say that, somebody out there is just, they're twitching, their eye is twitching, because there's a massive cult following for Howard the Duck. There is a massive cult following, and there are essays and YouTube videos and people who staunchly defend that movie to their grave. And it is, quite honestly, 2 hours that I will never get back. And it's funny because when I was younger, I watched that movie way more because it would come on, local TV a lot, like on Thursday nights and like on Saturday afternoons or whatever, right? And when you're a kid, you don't care. You don't you just see some weird, crazy shit, with respect to a talking duck and other things going on. You're just like, hey, I'll tune into this for a minute. But I got older, and about 5 years ago, we reviewed that movie for the Squadcast Movies Patreon show that we did over at Squadcast Media, and that movie is just absolutely atrocious. It's terrible. It's awful, right? And it was at the bottom of our list for a long time until we got to Son of the Mask, which was even worse, and just so many and these are movies based off of comics, right? Those movies vastly worse, in my humble subjective opinion, than anything the MCU or the DCEU has even thought of. Okay? Seriously. So to me, I feel like people are being hyperbolically lazy when they call any of those movies, whether it's BVS or, the Thor movies or whatever, when they call any of them the worst movies they've ever seen or the worst movies of all time, they are being hyperbolically lazy in that regard. And they may actually believe that. They might actually say those statements because they mean them, right? They may be trolling just to get a rise out of you, but maybe they actually do believe that. And if they actually do believe that, hey, listen, that's their business. That's their problem. It's all subjective. They can feel however they want. But you know what? I can't be friends with those people, truthfully. You know why I can't be friends with them, John? Because I don't think I would enjoy a single second of conversation with those people. And maybe there's some things we have in common. Maybe there's some things that we could agree on and enjoy. But I really am not interested in that. Because the last thing I want to do is get into an argument about how this was terrible what Zack Snyder did here, or that was terrible what Taika Waititi did there. I don't give a shit. I don't care. And a lot of the people that go out of their way to talk about worst movies they've ever seen, to talk about to make worse lists, those are people that would rather be negative than positive. They would rather focus on what they don't like instead of focusing on what they like, because they're making a worse list in the first place. Those are not people that I need to hang with. Those are not people that I need to talk to. Those are not people that I need to have in my circle, because that type of negativity has no place in my life. I have no time for it. And I try to keep it at bay as best as I can. Certainly there are times in the social media realm where that leaks through and it's like, all right, whatever, now I'm dealing with this for a second, but I'm eventually going to block this person. I'm eventually going to cut this person out of my life. I never wish to speak to this person or even know of their existence ever again. And that may seem harsh, but you know what? I'm at that point where I don't care, because I don't give a shit about echo chambers. Everybody builds echo chambers. Echo chambers are how you build your sanity. They're how you keep your sanity, right? And it doesn't mean that you just believe everything that is said. You still, judge information, as objectively as you can in terms of facts, right? But you still have your perception. You still have how you feel, and it's okay to only surround yourself with people that focus on the positive, right? You don't have to have somebody that focuses on the negative in your life. I defy that bullshit. And I have some friends of mine. My buddy Brian feels that way. My buddy Brian, who was the one that many years ago, when I was gushing over The Dark Knight, he was the one that asked me, he's like, okay, I need you to find 3 things about this movie that you absolutely don't like. And at the time that I did, he felt like it was a way of being objective, which I've now know and have learned in later years that that's bullshit. There's no such thing as being objective with respect to your opinion on movies. So the next time anybody asks me, can you find 3 things about a movie that you really love that you don't like, 3 things that you don't like about a movie that you really love, I will go, no, I don't want to. I don't need to. There is no point in me doing that. Let me enjoy what I enjoy. It's just like the meme, shh, let people enjoy things. Anybody that goes out there and tries to tell people, well, you need to be objective, no, bullshit. You're not objective, and neither am I, with respect to that. And anybody who says that any of these movies, or that anybody that categorizes worst movie ever, right? Anybody that says that as some type of declarative statement is not even remotely objective. It's a wholly subjective opinion, whatever it is, right? I don't even know that Freddy Got Fingered is the worst movie ever made. I don't know that. I know it's one of the worst I've ever seen. The 20 minutes of it that I was able to barely stomach in that regard, right? And no, before anybody says this, Ray, why don't you give the movie a chance? No, I will not. I will not give that movie a chance. I don't care. You can call that unfair if you want. I don't care. I'm never going to watch that movie again. No, absolutely not. Never going to actually try and give it a shot. I don't care what type of person Tom Green is, nice or otherwise, I don't know. But I have no interest in it whatsoever. I don't watch things that I'm not interested in. That just happened to be on one night, and I had seen Road Trip. And, he's not in Road Trip a ton, but I like the movie Road Trip. So I said, let's see what his solo effort is like. And yeah, no, never again. Not going to do that, right? But I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to have that opinion. Nobody forces you to watch these things. It's just like the people, that get so upset when Zack Snyder made movies. Like, nobody's forcing you to watch his shit. Nobody's forcing you to watch any of the versions, any of the director's cuts, or any of the extended cuts. Nobody's forcing you to watch anything that the man makes. And it's the same with any director, to be honest with you. It's the same with the Russos. It's the same with Taika Waititi, whoever it is, right? No one's forcing you to watch any of that. So the idea that you're so upset, that you're so bothered by it, that you have to create these worst lists and you have to really just harp on what you think is the worst ever, that's way too flippant negative for me. And I have no interest in that whatsoever. So no, those people are lazy hyperbolists in my opinion, and I don't have any desire to have any discussions with them or have any of them in my circle. None whatsoever. And I work with people like that, and some of that has come up in a discussion, and I'm just like, well, okay, I'll have one discussion with you about it now just because I'm curious where you sit on it, and then we're never going to speak of it again. Like, I have a coworker, like at my job last week, I was having a discussion about DC and Marvel movies the other day, and the coworker just, chimed in about how there are no good DC movies. And just for the sake of conversation, I wanted to see where he was coming from with it. And what it turns out is that he's way more of a Marvel fan. He grew up with Marvel, and he's way more into Marvel heroes and Marvel characters, and has just never cared for DC and their characterizations. Okay, cool. He also added a little thing later about how he's a big Star Wars fan, but he hated The Acolyte and was glad that it got canceled. Okay, so that's two reasons why I'm never going to talk to him about any of those movies and shows ever again. And we had a very civil discussion. I didn't snap at him. It didn't get heated. I just wanted to see where he was coming from and present my perspective on it. And that was it. It ended very amicably. There's no tension or anything like that. I just know that I'm never talking about any of those movies with him ever again, because that's not a discussion I'm going to enjoy. Period. And I'm fully within my rights to make that decision, and I'm not wrong for it, and nor am I necessarily right for it. It's just how I feel. That's the beauty of it's all subjective. Agreeing to disagree, which is where he and I are at in that regard. So that's what I would say with respect to this. So you know what? All the people that want to defend Freddy Got Fingered, hey, more power to you. It's all subjective. Go ahead. I will continue to defend Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition, and even the theatrical cut, right? The theatrical cut is, truncated and has a lot taken out of it that shouldn't have been taken out of it, but either way, I still think that either one of those movies, yes, I'll defend either one of them. Certainly the Ultimate Edition, to be honest with you. But yeah, we're all in different places, subjectively speaking, with respect to that. And there's no such thing as objectivity, because it is indeed all subjective. So there you have it. Thank you, John, as always, for the feedback. Thank you for the emails. There was a couple of them there. So some good thoughts, some good discussion this particular week. Appreciate that. All right, next up, Anthony Dorsey has sent us another long email missive titled Flight Chat 15, Make Your Own Future, Make Your Own Past. It's all right now. Which, of course, is quoting Ezra Miller's Barry Allen, The Flash, in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Let's see how fast we can get through this email. All right, so he says, "Hello there, Ray. I am back after a brief hiatus that did include a short email because I couldn't help myself. The movie I was a part of has finished shooting, and now I begin the process of once again looking for a new job or gig. Might have a short film in Raleigh in the near future. All right. Experience-wise, I enjoyed this project as it was the first professional set I've been on, so it was a few steps above any college project I worked on. It was well organized, everyone put their all into it, and any disagreements were kept private, unlike in some of my college projects. The budget was small and the pay was meager, but otherwise it was a worthwhile experience. That's about all I can say at the time, but I did see the Deadline put out an article about the movie, so I'll share that with you here. All right, a Deadline.com article. Well, I'll tell you what, I did read through it, Anthony, and congratulations. I'm glad that it was a worthwhile experience for you. I will tell you that I am unaware of this writer or any of these actors or any of this, who the production company or any of this or the title of this film. No idea. I haven't even seen any of the adjacent films next to it. If we want to discuss later exactly what project it is, I don't want to get you in trouble or anything, even though there is a Deadline article about it. I don't want you to, I don't know what NDAs or anything that you signed, so I will leave it untitled at this point. If we want to talk about it further in other flight chats or if we want to talk about it on social media, I will leave that at your discretion. But cool that there is a Deadline article for it for sure, and that it's coming out. glad that you had a good experience for it, and I hope that you find some success in finding another job. But he says also, since the last time I emailed, I recently saw Hans Zimmer live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and that was an incredible show, he says. I love how he highlights different musicians and singers for each piece, especially Tina Guo, the iconic electric cellist known for the Wonder Woman theme. Yes, Is She With You? From Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, of course. Other highlights include the incredible guitar solo added to the Man of Steel suite, he says, and how they presented the Dune pieces by splitting it into 3 songs throughout the show rather than a medley all at once like the rest of the pieces. After the intermission, he says he came out with a Canes jersey that said Zimmer 24 on the back when he played the TDK theme on electric guitar, and it was wild. Totally worth seeing if you're able to go. By the way, a Canes jersey, he's talking about the Carolina Hurricanes NHL franchise, won the Stanley Cup in 2006. Yes, I believe they beat the Oilers in 7 games back in the day. Yes, indeed. That was a couple of years after they lost the Stanley Cup Finals in 2002 to the Red Wings NHL Hall of Fame team, if you will. Brett Hull, Dominik Hasek, Luc Robitaille, Chris Chelios, Steve Yzerman, Brendan Shanahan, Sergei Fedorov, Igor Larionov, etc., etc. Oh, Nick Lidstrom, of course. Yes, all of those. A little bit of hockey, sports ball there for sure. It's your fault. You brought up that he was wearing a Canes jersey. Anyway, he says, now for some catch-up since the last email. Spoilers are kept to a minimum, except for the things I know you've seen, Ray. Well, let's see. I don't know if that's changed or not. He sent this 8 days ago, but let's go through this. He says, Lost Records, Bloom and Rage. Oh, this is a video game. He says, since you seemed interested in this game the last time I discussed it, I wanted to share the latest trailer, which shows some gameplay. There was more gameplay shown with alpha footage, but I've seen enough to not have to see a big chunk of gameplay in a relatively early state. I'm very excited for this game's release next year, but what do you think? Okay, this was from, oh yeah, this particular game. All right, I'm looking at the trailer for it now. No, it does look interesting. It does look intriguing. I wouldn't say it's necessarily like at the top of my list, but this does look like an intriguing game, right? And is it PS5 exclusive? It looks like it is, which means we'd have to get a PS5 to be in order to play it in this regard. But no, it does look intriguing. I'm curious about the storyline and the idea behind it. So no, it looks cool. It does look kind of cool, to be honest with you. Next up, a show, Batman Caped Crusader. He says, I recently binged this show, and I'm honestly a bit mixed on it. A lot of my opinion on this show comes down to my taste and what I want to see out of a Batman show or adaptation, as he's a character that has been adapted to death, especially in animation. This show, being a spiritual successor to Batman the Animated Series, also gives it a unique place, as they could have just repeated what was done already, and I appreciated when they decided to change things up in this show. I especially love this new version of Harley Quinn, as they stayed true to the character while also doing something very different and severing her connection to the Joker, among other changes. The updates to Firefly, Firebug, and the more classic Clayface were also appreciated. Other characters like Catwoman and Two-Face weren't too radically different, and I liked how they were used, especially how they ended Two-Face's story. Some people like to complain about changes to the lore and adaptations. I've done a fair amount of that myself for certain adaptations like Halo or Cassandra Cain in Birds of Prey, The Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. Yes. I'm sure previous episodes of the Hexagon/Flight Chat will document that, Anthony. He says, but with this show, I was much more interested in the new changes over the more traditional versions, due to this being a Bruce Timm show, as he's already given us definitive editions of so many Batman characters that I was glad to see he didn't want to do just the same stuff again. He even included ideas that were dropped from the original series, like the Nocturne episode. Didn't know that until you and Scott's DCTV episode. Glad to see that back, by the way. Thank you. Also want to say that the voice cast throughout the show is excellent. I liked Hamish Linklater in other roles like in Midnight Mass, but at first I thought his Batman was a bit bland. That was until I realized what he was going for with this emotionally and socially stunted Batman/Bruce, who never recovered from the trauma of his parents' death, which we see through a very creepy scene of Bruce as a kid. Oh yes, extremely creepy. I do agree with Scott that the animation was a bit weak at times, but overall that wasn't an issue for me. Anthony says, most of my issues with this show are due to my own personal taste, as I felt a lot of the show that wasn't new stuff was just retreading old ground, and I think a lot of these creatives are stuck in a rut of wanting early Batman at the beginning of his career, adapting elements of Year One and Long Halloween, which are stories I love, but I felt like this show was my last straw of wanting to be done with those stories getting adapted. Batman has 85 years worth of stories, and it's time to pick some other stories to make into movies and shows. Two-Face is my favorite Batman villain, but I don't need to keep seeing his origin, and it was barely different here compared to Batman the Animated Series, albeit with a more Dark Knight-inspired look, but also a much less genuine friendship with Bruce. I appreciated that the show was willing to delve into the fantastical at times, unlike the Batman epic crime saga, but it was still a generally realistic iteration, and I hope Season 2 dives deeper into the fantastical to better separate it from other adaptations. Okay, I will say one thing before I get to the rest of your thoughts on that. I mean, I don't know. I don't have an issue with them adapting Year One and Long Halloween because I go even further in that I like to see other ideas and other adaptations on those stories. I mean, you're right. Batman has been adapted many, many times. And so seeing new twists on characters and stories applies to me as well. And I do disagree with you about Two-Face. I think there's more than enough different there, right? The big bad Harv thing never showed up here. Okay, that's not what this was about. And on top of that, the whole disfiguring of Two-Face is way more comic accurate than what was in Batman the Animated Series. I appreciated that. I thought that was cool, personally. So I don't agree that it was barely different than in Batman the Animated Series. I don't agree with that. And I had issues, as I said, in the DC TV Squadcast. I had issues in terms of how the look was shown, but I did get that, yes, it was a more realistic look. Maybe even more so than The Dark Knight itself in that regard, right? But as far as the fantastical... Once you get to the, what is it, the Gentleman Ghost or whatever that ghost was in episode 6, and certainly within Nocturne, like, dude, Papa Midnight is in this show. When you bring Papa Midnight into a Batman series, no, as far as I'm concerned, that is far more fantastical, than anything, I would not call it generally realistic iteration once a character like Papa Midnight shows up, who I now know his first name is Linton. Did not know that before Batman Cape Crusader. His name is Linton Midnight. So, yeah, once a character like him shows up and you throw voodoo and whatnot into the mix, game over as far as generally realistic, in my humble opinion. But Anthony goes on to say that he kind of liked the various Robin cameos in the Nocturne episode, but he says, I took that as the only way those characters will appear in this show, and essentially ruled out any Bat family members becoming a part of the show beyond maybe Barbara taking on the role of Batgirl or Batwoman or Oracle, and this is a trend that's disappointed me since the stupid Robin name drop in Dark Knight Rises. All right, here we go. He's about to rant. Here we go. He says, I just want DC adaptations to stop being embarrassed by Robin being Batman's sidekick. I don't need any more bones being thrown my way like a name drop that goes nowhere or some kids sharing names and some personalities with 4 of the Robins only to likely to be never seen again. Like the Batman, I thought this was a good show, but with a million versions of Batman out there, I'm just waiting for one more geared to what I like about the character and his mythos instead of retreading old ground and being shy about including Bat family elements. And I hope the next season continues to explore great new ground like they did with characters like Harley Quinn or Barbara Gordon, who I didn't mention much, but I like this lawyer Barbara because it was something different but still very much works, and I am looking forward to more, and I hope it releases soon. If you're a new fan, then I'm thrilled that you get a show this good to start with. If you've seen almost every adaptation like I have, then it's a lot more of the same, but with some clever changes. 8 out of 10. Okay, definitely don't agree with that last sentence. A lot more of the same, but the Bat family is a trigger for you, Anthony. It most certainly is. We've had this discussion before, and to me, maybe I'm just happier or more optimistic. I don't know. I'm not sure how to put it that way. Not trying to be mean or anything, but those cameos in Nocturne, I was the Leonardo DiCaprio gift from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood on each one of them. I liked it. I thought it was really cool. And no, I don't think that it completely dismisses the idea of Bat Family. First of all, you got Bat Family in Batman the Animated Series. So technically, by your own, definition and rules, if you will, if they were to go Bat Family in Batman Cape Crusader, they would be treading into more of what they did in Batman the Animated Series. Because, come on, you got Dick Grayson, and that version of Dick Grayson is my favorite version of Dick Grayson, to be honest with you. We ended up getting Tim Drake later on. We got Barbara Gordon as Batgirl, and I still think that's going to happen, right? At some point, I do think that's going to happen with this Barbara in Cape Crusader. But to me, I know you feel very strongly about Bat Family. That really seems to be like your sticking point with respect to Batman adaptations. But I don't have a problem with how many times Batman is being adapted. I don't. And the reason I don't is the same thing I said in DC TV Squadcast. I'm always curious about what a new interpretation of the story is going to be and what changes are made here. And I think it's harsh to say that, oh, they're embarrassed to do Robin. They're embarrassed to do Bat Family. If that were the case, Titans Season 3 wouldn't exist. Just being honest. Now, I don't remember what you felt about that or not, but I don't think it's a case of them being embarrassed to do Bat Family. I think it's a case where Batman's the moneymaker. Batman is the god-tier, popular DC character on the same level as Spider-Man, higher than Superman, higher than any others in the DC pantheon, and they know beyond the shadow of a doubt they're always going to be able to make money with just his character, and they haven't felt a need to add Bat Family. I don't think that's the same as being embarrassed by Bat Family. I really don't. I really don't feel that way, and I think that in many ways, because of your connection to Bat Family, you take it personally when you don't see Bat Family in the adaptation. But I will remind you that you're getting Bat Family in Batman the Brave and the Bold. So again, Anthony, we must root for the success of Superman next year. We must root for the success of the DCU so that Batman and the Brave and the Bold will happen, because then you will get Damian as Robin. And if you're getting Damian as Robin, you're getting Bat Family. Come on, let's not kid ourselves here. You're getting Bat Family, okay? That's going to happen. Big screen Bat Family. And not that you haven't already had big screen Bat Family at your disposal, because technically we have. But I'm saying you're going to get more of that with Batman the Brave and the Bold. I'm really not that bothered that we haven't gotten that much of it. You're welcome to. It's your business. It's all subjective. You can feel whatever you want. But no, I don't feel like Caped Crusader was just, a lot more of the same, but with some clever changes. I think that's harsh. I do. I think that's a harsh statement to make about it. But again, it's all subjective. We feel however we want about it. But again, I know Bat Family that's a sticking point. That is a trigger for you. Good sir. All right, let's move on with the rest of your email here. You have some thoughts on the cancellation of The Acolyte. You haven't talked about this yet? I guess not. He says, in the time since this news came out, I feel like the outrage has mostly died off. I'll see a comment here or there, but honestly, I might have forgotten to talk about this if I didn't write in the topic when I started planning this email out weeks ago. As I've previously said about this show, I thought it was pretty good with some excellent fight choreography and some other good bits, but also a lot of stuff I felt could have been improved. All that improvement could have happened in Season 2 and beyond, he says. I'm sad the show is canceled so they can't achieve those improvements and continue the storylines they set up, but I'm admittedly not too broken up about it as it was far from my favorite series. What did upset me about this news was the victory lap it allowed the fandom menace to take for once again making Lucasfilm pivot away from something they whined about, just like what happened with Episode 9 after they whined about The Last Jedi. Like The Rise of Skywalker or not as it is, a lot of why I didn't like it was because it felt creatively bankrupt, as if they read a list of Reddit complaints and addressed each one line by line, kind of like what happened with some of Justice League in response to the complaints to BVS. Regardless of whether the Acolyte is saved from the cancellation pile or not, I dearly hope they don't back away from highlighting a diverse cast like this show had, nor do I want them to abandon ideas to set stories in eras not connected to the Skywalkers. Disney is starting to get into a bad rut for Star Wars being violent, being risk-avoidant, reactionary, and nostalgia-driven, and I'm ready for that to end. I also want to reiterate what I've said to you online and say that if you want to save this show, then you, fans of The Acolyte, need to be loud like the release of Snyder Cut fans were and incessant like fans of the Clone Wars were. It took years for those movements to achieve their goals, and maybe all it will take is the right people being in charge or just the right time, right place. Support the cast and crew, unlike how Disney let them out to dry, and spread the positivity for the show on social media and in real life. Never give up, never surrender. Okay. Two things about that I disagree with that I just want to talk about real quick here. First of all, with respect to your thoughts on The Rise of Skywalker and comparing it to Justice League, I don't think it's an apples-to-apples comparison. I'm not saying that you're saying that it is, but I just want to make the distinction that Rise of Skywalker, while there definitely are similarities with respect to that in Justice League in terms of what was changed because of reaction to a previous film, at least that happened before production. At least Colin Trevorrow was let go, J.J. Abrams was rehired, and Chris Terrio was brought in to write a new script. At least that occurred before any principal photography happened, right? It wasn't a case where Disney shot Rise of Skywalker twice. Okay, at least that did not happen. That's what makes the Snyder Cut situation with Zack Snyder's Justice League way, way worse. Way worse in that regard. So just want to make that particular distinction there for that. That's first thing. The second thing is with respect to what you're talking about, that comparing it to the release of the Snyder Cut movement if we really want to see more of the Acolyte. The reason this is extremely different circumstances, and I'm not saying that people should just withdraw their support of the Acolyte and, do petitions and make their voice known. I'm not saying they shouldn't do that. But I'm saying that as far as your expectations with respect to being loud like Release the Snyder Cut fans were and incessant like fans of the Clone Wars were, incessant like fans of the Clone Wars is one thing, right? Because that noise, like if you continue talking about the Acolyte, over a span of years, that may be what you're looking for with respect to results like that. But Release the Snyder Cut, that was a perfect storm of a situation where the reason we even had a shot in hell of that seeing the light of day, for us being able to watch it and for me being able to own it in physical media form or see it in digital form is because of the timing of the release of Max, the pandemic, and a number of other, like a need for content at that time from the powers that be that were involved in Warner Brothers and Warner Media at the time as it existed then before the Discovery merger, right? There was a need for that, and there was an open avenue and opportunity to be able to push it through in not desperation, but just, the stars aligned for that one. And I really would not expect or get my hopes up for anything like that to happen with the Acolyte. I don't think hashtags and anything like that, I don't think it's going to be quite as strong, or at least not quite as immediate of an impact in that regard, and I wish it weren't. I think it's interesting that Disney still hasn't officially said that this thing is canceled. And I know you've brought that up before, Anthony, that there hasn't been any official word from them. They haven't said boo about it being canceled or not in that regard. And I know that some people have speculated that even though we're not going to see a second season of The Acolyte, allegedly, that some of those elements and characters may be passed on into other Disney Plus Star Wars shows. Yes, indeed. That is possible. But I think that we just need to keep perspective with respect to, how loud fans are going to be, like what your actual intent is going to be for trying to get The Acolyte a second season, if that's even possible. It may not be possible. Disney may have already, written that off and closed the door on it, because it's just a different set of circumstances. It's a different time frame, right? Back in 2020 when Max was launching as a new app as HBO Max back in the day, they needed content, and the Snyder Cut was able to fill a void for Max original content, and it just worked out that way. We're now at a point where post strikes, all of these studios are recoiling on their streaming efforts. They're cutting back on budgets, they're cutting back on shows, and it's not looking good. It's entirely possible that as much as the fandom menace has been taking a victory lap for why, for The Acolyte being canceled, that it was budgetary reasons. And I still find that to be bullshit in that regard, because I feel like, the budget for The Acolyte didn't need to be as insanely high as it reportedly was in that regard. But I'm just saying, we're in a different financial climate, and a different social climate, a different climate in terms of the streaming wars and the streaming age. So as far as the hope for fans to, keep The Acolyte going, we're in a different place. We're in a very different place with that. And Star Wars is also a very different franchise than DC is in that regard. For all of the issues that many have had with Kathleen Kennedy or with anybody at Lucasfilm in that regard, they have still managed to put out some consistent content on Disney Plus, in the last number of years since the release of The Rise of Skywalker, which was that the last movie? That came out after Solo, didn't it? Yes, it did. Solo came out before that. So, yeah, and we just got to wait and see what happens with Skeleton Crew here in December and the Rey movie and other projects going forward, So I think that definitely we should still make the presence known as far as The Acolyte. And it's tough to say, social media can't be the end-all be-all in terms of, like, the gauge of attention for something like The Acolyte continuing with the second season. Like, it is a factor, but it can't be the end-all be-all factor. I'm not saying that anyone is necessarily saying that it's the end-all be-all factor, but when you talk about the outrage mostly dying off, we have a short attention spans, and the new thing comes around, and that's what you see on social media, right? It's not like this is going to continue to be as loud of outrage as it was from the moment that it happened in that regard, the moment that it was reported, going forward. But like, I feel like many people still do feel strongly about it. And again, not that they should be quiet, not that they should just sit down, but just manage your expectations with respect to comparing it to the Snyder Cut, release the Snyder Cut, and comparing it to any other situations, right? I feel like this is way more of a Clone Wars situation where it may take years before you see any type of result on this, or it really the more realistic outcome of this might be seeing those characters from the Acolyte popping up in other areas of live action Star Wars, in the not too distant future. That might be the most realistic idea here, if you will. But, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But, it is what it is. I'm not saying give up. I'm not saying surrender. But I am saying manage your expectations, because it's not the same situation as what we had with Release the Snyder Cut and other things, to be honest with you. So, all right. We're not even halfway through Anthony's email. Maybe we're a little halfway through. This next one, I don't have a lot to add, because he's talking about Alien Romulus. He says, granted, I don't have much experience with the Alien franchise. I decided to see this movie because the trailer looked awesome. I have seen Alien and Aliens and thought those were great, but have yet to see the rest due to hearing lots of mixed things about those movies. I heard Romulus was more of a legacy sequel to the first movie, with only that one being required viewing, and so I was confident that I didn't need to catch up to see this movie on the big screen. Having seen those movies, it does give me some insight into the backstory of Romulus, but this is a totally new thing with an all-new cast, and I found it very accessible and was consistently thrilled by this movie, especially through the main characters of Rain, Kaylee Spaney, and Andy, David Johnson, who had a relatable yet still very science fiction series of problems, with Andy being a synthetic who did an amazing job when he had personality changes. The specific connection to the original movie with a digitally recreated actor didn't take away from the movie for me due to the way they used the character, but I can understand why people wouldn't like this if they're bigger fans of the franchise or simply against the recreation of dead actors at all. Anyway, I don't want to go on too long here, but I thought director Fede Alvarez and crew did a phenomenal job on this film, with tons of thrills and good scares, as well as one very cheesy line callback from one of the other films. High but personal stakes, great tension, and incredible visuals, especially in the third act, are worth the price of admission. Hope they do a direct sequel. 9 out of 10. I will watch it eventually at home in daylight, maybe. I don't know. I got to think about it, because I am a fan of the Alien franchises. I think the only ones I haven't seen Covenant, and I haven't seen Alien vs. Predator Requiem. I think that's it, as far as, because I've seen Prometheus, I've seen Alien, I've seen Aliens, I've seen Alien 3, I've seen Alien Resurrection, I've seen AVP, the first AVP, right? So I think I've seen a good amount of them, like I said, except for Covenant and AVP Requiem in that regard. I think those are the only ones I have not seen. So yeah, there's probably going to be more references in there that I might pick out, but I don't think I'll miss anything, but I'll have to wait and see. That might be one I'd have to do a Patreon review for sure. Next up, Never Stop Blowing Up finale. Oh, this is the D&D show with Brennan Lee Mulligan from Dropout. Yes, all right. Have not watched any of it. He says, since I talked about this show at length in my last email, I wanted to quickly update on it now that it's done. I loved this 10-episode D&D series so much. It was bonkers in all the right ways, with players and Brennan as DM consistently one-upping each other and how crazy they can get, but still ending up bringing it back to their individual arcs, which pretty much all culminate in either a small or large way by the finale, which a villainous president flying the White House like a glider, and that's just how the finale starts. And in that end, that's what I appreciated most. Since a show like this is all player-driven, especially with how loosely Brennan tried to keep them on task in the series, the way the story wrapped up depended entirely on what the players wanted to see concluded, and everybody got what they wanted, very literally at one point, and it made for a worthwhile conclusion with a tease for a possible sequel series that I hope they do at some point amidst all their other D&D campaigns. I once again highly recommend this series on Dropout. The first episode was a bit on the rails, so they could properly introduce all the characters and the story, but very quickly goes off the rails in the next episode, and by the end, you've experienced the most sick action movie of all time. All right, fair enough. Anthony is our resident Dropout PR manager. He is a marketing manager, if you will. He is heavy on promoting Dropout TV, wants everybody to watch Dropout TV. All right, there you go. Next up, Veep. He's got some thoughts on Veep from HBO. He said, I don't get into politics in these emails, but I'll just say the recent excitement surrounding certain developments in the election got me interested in finally checking out this award-winning HBO series, following the first female vice president who eventually goes on to, maybe no spoilers, become president. I finished the entire series recently, and it made for a fantastic binge watch, and the praise is not exaggerated. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is perfect for this role, as she so perfectly captures this two-faced politician who will do and say anything if it ensures her legacy and later to win the presidency. Much of what transpires throughout the show seems very much like things that could happen in the real political landscape, but most likely with less well-written comedy. As we know, the comedy surrounding real politics would be thrown out in a TV's writer's room as too ridiculous. I did appreciate that they didn't often parallel direct political events or candidates, especially as the show covers fictional versions of the 2016 and 2020 elections, but with a different set of candidates and events, including something that's never happened in real life and would be the most stressful thing to watch if it were it to happen in this election. The supporting cast was all excellent, and I'll remember the core group of this show fondly as one of the best comedic casts I've seen, with top-tier use of cursing and timing, along with knowing that they're all terrible people. Great show that's fully worth adding to your list, especially if you're interested in fictional but realistic politics in a comedy show. I haven't seen The West Wing, but from what I know of it, it seems like an idealized form of Washington politics, while Veep is more what it's probably like. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Like, what I've seen with West Wing is, the idealism is in the commentary, if you will. It's not necessarily like the world that they're in is idealized, but the characters are speaking on what they're observing in that world. At least that's the vibe that I get from Aaron Sorkin shows, because that's how Sports Night kind of was, and that's certainly how The Newsroom was, to be honest with you. I have not watched The West Wing in its entirety. I've watched more of clips from The West Wing, and I'm very intrigued to watch that show. That I know that they're releasing the whole series on Blu-ray at some point. I don't know if they've done that with Veep or not, but yeah, intriguing. I've heard good things about it. It's on the long-term list, I'll put it that way. So next up is Anthony's thoughts on Presumed Innocent, a mini-series on Apple TV+. This show follows Jake Gyllenhaal playing a prosecutor accused of murdering his co-worker whom he was having an affair with. Anthony says, I found it to be a very compelling drama, especially through its clever editing and cinematography, making it seem like he's always being watched or followed and continually obsessing over the woman he's accused of murdering. Great court drama and family drama make this show a great watch, he says. It's based on a book that also inspired a movie of the same name in the 90s starring Harrison Ford in the lead role. I didn't watch the movie, but I did watch the trailer for it on Apple, and I'm mentioning this only to say to please watch that trailer and vindicate me for thinking the music used in that trailer sounds almost exactly like Zimmer's score for the Dark Knight trilogy. Back to the show, he says, a big reason I watched it was because the kid playing Gyllenhaal's son was the lead in the movie I just worked on, and this show was his big break, and already he's got several other projects lined up off of it. Knowing this was more suspicious of his character than I would have been otherwise, and I won't tell you if that suspicion was warranted or not. The final reveal was shocking, but in the best way where it could be guessed if you pick up on the right hints. 8 out of 10. All right, yeah, I wondered when I saw the title, I wondered if it had anything to do with the Harrison Ford movie, which I have not seen, but yes, definitely aware of it. All right, let's see, let's continue here. Ahsoka, the Patterson cut? You might be asking, he says, what even is this? The Patterson cut of Ahsoka is a fan edit from Kai Patterson, turning the full season of Ahsoka into a 3-hour movie. He's made similar edits for Obi-Wan and Book of Boba Fett, but this is the only one I've watched so far. This edit took 10 months of work, and I found the trailer impressive enough that I checked out the full thing. As you know, I'm also an editor, but I have no experience with VFX, so I found the effects he added at certain points incredibly impressive from one person. Namely, the inclusion of Malachor as a backdrop for the final part of Ahsoka's duel with Anakin in the World Between Worlds, adding in that callback to their fight in Rebels. To get this show down to under 3 hours, much was cut, but also the pacing was sped up through clever edits and some parts being accelerated. The fight scenes especially are sped up, making them more tense but also often over too quickly. This was a problem I had throughout. Now, I've only watched through the whole show once back when it aired, so I didn't remember all the scenes that were cut, but the ones I missed were Sabine's intro on the speeder and the Senate scene with the C-3PO cameo. Much is cut from the first couple of episodes in order to immediately give Baylan the star map, as well as everything around Sabine getting stabbed and surviving. Most of this was fine to cut for me, as I didn't care for the lightsaber impalement only needing a day in the hospital to heal, but I did like that duel with her and Shin otherwise, and without it, their later rematch lacks meaning. He also sped through her training a bit due to these changes and mostly removed her conflict with Ahsoka in these early episodes, now the first act of the movie. There were also some Baylan and Shin scenes I felt were either cut or rushed through that I would have kept in. He also mostly cut out the zombie stormtroopers in the finale. A big problem I had with this edit was that due to the faster pacing, many of the fun, whimsical scenes or even quiet moments of levity were either cut entirely or rushed through. Overall, I think this edit is worth the watch if you've already seen the show and want to watch it again, but with faster pacing, some altered color grading, mostly better but not all better, some new visuals, and changes to the events that could be considered good and others bad. I do commend the efforts by Kai Patterson to improve a show he said he liked, but since this was all the work of one fan, this is always he thinks it could have been improved. Some of what he cut I would have kept, and other changes he made I felt could have been different, not changed. I think it could have been much improved if he made it 3.5 hours or went full Snyder cut at 4 hours in order to not speed up the pacing this much and keep more of those cut scenes. I do want to check out his other cuts at some point, and when I do, I'll give you my thoughts. Interested in hearing your thoughts on my review of this fan edit. My thoughts are it's an intriguing idea and, cool for him as far as spending 10 months of his life doing it. It's not something I'm going to watch. And the reason I'm not going to watch it is because, to me, it flies in the face of the creative freedom of the actual intent of the show. Ahsoka wasn't meant to be a movie. It was meant to be a show. And it was created as such. And I believe in going with the original intent of the creators. They built it to be a show. And, I'm sure that, Kai Patterson thought, it'd be cool to see how this was a movie. But that's part of the discussion that we've had about these Star Wars shows. People saying, oh, well, they're just movies that are cut into episodes. They don't feel like actual TV shows. Well, they are TV shows. That's the thing, right? You don't have to like how they're cut. You can have issues with how they structure it, but they're TV shows at the end of the day. And so I'm not really interested in seeing somebody's subjective idea on what they think the movie should be. And this is on a case-by-case basis because there is a fan edit of Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, called Beyond the Barrier, which is a fan edit of the movie, which to me, I do think improves upon what that movie is, because I think it's the worst Star Trek movie ever made. That's why I don't talk about it very much. But he didn't turn it into a show from a movie. He kept it as a movie. And he added a couple of things. He can only do what he could with respect to visual effects, but it just gives you another light to look at the movie, if it was done with a slightly different bent. It didn't change anything major in terms of, pacing or in terms of, the story itself. It's still the same story of Star Trek V, but that one was one that I was curious about because Star Trek V is kind of out there and has its issues. Many people do consider it one of the worst in the franchise in that regard, and I wanted to see if there was anything about it that would lead me to not be so harsh about it, and I did find some stuff about it. In this case, I like the Ahsoka show. I don't really see the need to watch it as a movie because I'm not into this whole argument of these are just long movies that are cut up into episodes and they don't have a natural break. I'm not into that argument. And I know plenty of people, we have peers that buy into that argument, and it's just not interested in it, to be honest with you. So it's the same reason why I remember, was it Joseph Gordon-Levitt who did that edit of The Phantom Menace that cut out all of Jar Jar? It's like, I don't need that anymore. I'm at that point where I can watch The Phantom Menace and refer to it without feeling so angry and so offended by Jar Jar Binks in that regard. There are some redeeming qualities for the original vision that George Lucas had for The Phantom Menace, and I'm going to leave it at that. So that's honestly how I feel about that. I will probably never watch the Patterson cut. I'm just not interested. I don't need it. I have the show, and I will continue with the show, and I look forward to how they continue the show on that. But I'm glad that you enjoyed it. It is good that you enjoyed it, Anthony, for what it was in that regard, for sure. Next up, Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy. All right, here we go. In true Lego Star Wars fashion, Anthony says, this 4-part special was a ton of fun, filled with references for fans and so much mayhem. Starring original characters brothers Sig and Dev Griebling, played by Gates Matarazzo and Tony Revolori, respectively, who are Nerf herders on a backwater planet. They soon meet up with Jedi Bob, who longtime Lego Star Wars fans might know as the unnamed Jedi in the original Republic gunship back in 2002, played by Bobby Moynihan, and unravel the fabric and story of the Star Wars galaxy as if a kid put all their Star Wars figures and sets into a bin and shook it all up. Akbar clone troopers fight for an empire led by Sith lords like Darth Jar Jar, Darth Rey, Darth Rose Tico, Darth Kit Fisto, and Darth Devastator. The Jedi Council includes Masters Palpatine, Vader, Jabba, and Cad Bane, and they live in hiding in a sandcrawler with AT-AT legs. C-3PO is a bounty hunter in a golden Nubian cruiser. Luke Skywalker is a hotshot pod racer on the beach planet of Tatooine. Timelines and alignments are all thrown out the window, leading to much fun and hijinks. The animation was very reminiscent of the Lego Movie, though on a smaller budget, with a surprisingly good personal story and message at the end. It also leaves it open for a continuation, and I hope they do more. My one complaint is not enough Darth Jar Jar. Though what we get of him is great, they marketed him as the main antagonist, and he simply isn't. There are endless possibilities for more great twists if they continue this, as there are plenty of characters they didn't include, and the reveal at the end is excellent, even though Disney Plus spoils it in the next episode screen for the 4th part. I'm not going to rate this just because it's a Lego special, but if you're a fan looking for a good time, you'll have fun with this. It might take one or two minor shots at the sequels, but I find it forgivable since Darth Rey has a prominent role and Kelly Marie Tran returns for Darth Rose Tico, which is nice that she's still interested in even returning after how she was treated. Mark Hamill, Anthony Daniels, Sam Witwer, and Ahmed Best are also prominent returning cast. All right, cool. I'll put that on the long-term list. Glad that it's on Disney+. And it's Legos, and of course I love Legos, so definitely keep that in mind. All right, a couple more things Anthony's got some thoughts on here. Speak No Evil, a horror thriller starring James McAvoy, which builds tension from beginning to end. Very methodically paced, making it slow at times, and you're not getting jump scares or the like here, as it's all about the build-up and the payoff is pretty strong, as well as the eventual lesson about boundaries, he says. There are only 6 main actors throughout the film, but everyone was great, including the 2 child actors. Not a high recommendation, but I thought it was pretty good. 7 out of 10. All right, fair enough. Oh, and he did watch the Agatha All Along premiere. He said it was solid. His expectations for the show were non-existent, but he thought it was fun. Dark when it needs to be, with well-used character-based humor and a very catchy new witchy song. He says, I do think they could have had a bit more recap of her character from WandaVision, since that was 3 years ago, but that's a complaint I could have for most of the MCU at this point, as it all requires some amount of homework. I'm just taking the show as it is, though, and I'm looking forward to just having a good time with it. I still need to watch it, because the only show that has premiered in the last week or so that I have actually watched is the last one that you're talking about here, Anthony, which is the Penguin premiere. And you said, excellent premiere. I won't get into the recent discussions we've had about my thoughts on the Batman Epic Crime Saga, but after the Batman and now this premiere, I have high expectations for it despite my low investment. That's interesting. Bit of an oxymoron, but all right. He says the quality is almost totally unmatched in the comic book genre, with this show being reminiscent of the show Gotham, but with a focus on the Penguin and an obvious influence from The Sopranos. While Agatha does briefly parody a prestige crime drama, this show is a prestige crime drama and should be treated as such. In just one episode, we get great twists, tense action, a budding mentorship, and a story that will have you on the edge of your seat the whole time. Colin Farrell is transformed into his role and unrecognizable, yet again. Kristen Milioti is also insanely impressive as Sophia Falcone, and I can't wait to see what they do with this adaptation of her character. Oz's new young partner, Victor Aguilar, played by Renzi Feliz, was an interesting new addition, and since I didn't know what his name would be going in, I did think he could have been an adaptation of Jason Todd based on his introduction, and I would have been fine with that. There you go with Bat Family again. I do still see some inspiration, but maybe I'm reaching, maybe a little. I think this show will be pretty great, and I'm looking forward to watching it weekly. And then he says, we've come to the end of this long catch-up email. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Ray, for reading and responding to it. And thank you to my fellow listeners and contributors for listening and putting up with my long-winded missives. Till next time, Anthony Dorsey. All right, let's time this. Where are we at? Where we go? How long was that? Looks like by my count, 40 minutes. Okay, 40 minutes, a little over 40 minutes with respect to Anthony's email. Hey, I think we're doing all right there. We'll see if we can try and trim it even faster on the next go-around. But yes, indeed, thank you, as always, for your missives, Anthony. Greatly appreciated for your feedback. Looking forward to the next one. And as always, good luck with your job hunt, good sir. All right, next up is Waliyu Mustafa, whose email is entitled Holy Walk of Fame, Batman, which leads me to believe he listened to Friday Flight on patreon.com/theflightcast the other night. So here we go. He says, hey, Ray, I am not mad at you for saying Batman is more popular than Superman. The data does support that. But I want you to remember that without Superman, characters like Batman, Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four would not exist. The very concept of Superman was realized way back in 1933 when Joe and Jerry started him off as a bald villain called the Superman. Remind you of anyone? It was around 1935 that they changed him to be a hero instead, and thus began the journey of the very character we now know as Superman and the many iterations he has had over the last 86 years of his existence. Alright. He says, however, you are right in asking why it took so long for Batman to get his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Given how many versions of the character we've had on the big screen since 1989, you could also add 1966 with the Adam West movie, I guess. Yes, that does count, because that was theatrically released. Whereas Superman has had significantly less, he says. But hey, he has a star now, and I can only hope Superman is not far behind, even if they are waiting to see how the general audience reacts to James Gunn's movie on July 11th, 2025. I have signed the petition, by the way, and the guy who started it off is called Stephen Kirk, who was well known in the Superman circles, and in Hollywood as he brushed shoulders with the likes of William Shatner. I met him in 2013 when I visited Metropolis for the Superman celebration. Yeah, and this was because I talked about how Superman did, or Batman really, he did get a star on the Walk of Fame. And there's definitely a strong contingent of Superman fans that are asking where the hell his star on the Walk of Fame is. And yeah, they might actually be waiting for the movie next year because, again, amazingly and quite ridiculously, if you will, David Corenswet will be only our third Superman cinematic interpretation. I've said that many times before, and it's still ridiculous every time that I say it, considering that we've had so many Batmen, right? Ask Anthony. Anthony knows. Anthony, how many Batmen have we had just on the big screen? You know. We all know that number, right? But Anthony is just waiting for big screen Robin, big screen Batgirl to accompany him in that regard. But yes, Superman has not had, you would think, with Christopher Reeve, and, whatever you feel about Henry Cavill, you would think that there'd be enough of a presence there, but it's only been just two, right? So not as many, not as generational, if you will. And hopefully that will change. It should change with David Corenswet's version. Fingers crossed. We'll see. But Wally says, I want to also pass on my condolences to the huge loss of both James Earl Jones and Dame Maggie Smith, two massive stars who have given us amazing characters over the decades. They will be sorely missed. I have rewatched The Graham Norton Show, where Sir Ian McKellen does the impression of Dame Maggie, and it never fails to make me laugh. And James Earl Jones with that scene from The Big Bang Theory knocking on Carrie Fisher's door. May they both rest in eternal power and peace. Yeah, and on top of that, Wally, right now, kind of breaking news, if you will, is at the time of me recording this, it is being reported that Chris Christopherson, otherwise known as Whistler from the Blade movies, has also passed. He was 88 years old. A musician and actor, been in countless different projects. So unfortunately, there's your third, if you will, with respect to the triples. And I'm sure there have been others in between here and there. But yeah, it's a tough time. Definitely a tough time for older celebrities and older, personalities that we've seen in Hollywood. May they all rest in power and peace eternally. I agree with that. Wally says, saw the trailers for both Thunderbolts and Ballerina. Have to say the former felt a bit meh for me. I know. I saw your response. That's why I kind of quoted it, if you will. He says, I think I need another trailer to be fully convinced. Ballerina, on the other hand, yes, please. Ana de Armas kicking all kinds of ass is my jam, and to see Lance Reddick one last time as Charon, his legacy continues to be felt everywhere. He even voices Lex Luthor on Kite Man, hell yeah, which I finally finished, and it was great. But back to Ballerina, great to see the Baba Yaga himself, John Wick, making an appearance. I think I'm going to enjoy this movie a lot. Yeah, if I'm picking the trailers that I like better than the other, yes, I do think the Ballerina trailer was better than the Thunderbolts trailer. But again, with Thunderbolts, it just looks like the MCU version of the Suicide Squad, and I'm down for that. I'm not nearly as meh on the trailer as you are, Wally. I did see your reaction to that on Threads. It looks intriguing, and a number of those characters like Ghost and, not Yelena. I mean, I don't have any issues with Yelena, but I'm not like the massive Florence Pugh fan that so many others are, if you will. But like Ghost and like Valentina De Fontaine, but Julia Louis-Dreyfus' character, and even U.S. Agent, like there are other characters that we have met, and Bucky, of course, that I'm very intrigued to see in this movie. So we'll see how it goes. It's going to be Suicide Squad with MCU tone. I am curious to see exactly how that plays out. I'll say that. And that curiosity is enough for me to be higher than meh with respect to that trailer. But we'll see. We've got some time before it releases middle of next year. He says, wanted to also pass on my thanks to you and Scott for reviewing The Penguin on DC TV Squadcast. I look forward to more episodes and cannot wait to hear your thoughts as the show goes on. A great start to the show, if I may say so. And my goodness, do you forget that Colin Farrell is playing Oz? Oh yeah, he vanishes. Absolutely vanishes. You'd have no idea it was him if you weren't told that it was him. Period. No matter who it is. He says, in regards to other stuff that I have watched recently, I have finished Zack Snyder's Twilight of the Gods, and let me say that show is not to be watched in front of or with kids or even at work. It's a very compelling show about the Norse gods, including Thor, Loki, and the Giants. It is centered around a female character called Sigrid, whose family is butchered, and she goes on a journey to kill the one responsible. What really surprised me about this show is how ridiculously powerful Thor is. Like, I mean, he uses lightning in ways not even the MCU has thought of. Crazy stuff. But yes, one for the list, and be prepared for some very, and I mean very gratuitous sex scenes. Even in animation form, it was quite an eye-opener. Ahem. Yeah, Twilight of the Gods, that kind of snuck up on me. Like, Scott had mentioned that he'd gone to, hobnob and bump elbows with Zack Snyder again because they're best buds. And he went out there for the premiere of Twilight of the Gods over in Atlanta. But the release snuck up on me, so it's on the list. I still have not even watched the extended versions of Rebel Moon. I have not even watched that yet. I mean, the list continues to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, and I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. Not sure how I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to have to, like, switch jobs in order to be able to find time to be able to watch all this shit, to be very honest with you, but I don't know. I'll figure something out, I suppose. Wally says, what else have I been watching? Yes, Slow Horses Season 4 is back, and as always, Gary Oldman is just bringing the laughs. This season, they have the enigmatic Hugo Weaving as the villain, and he is doing really well. Well, he's a badass villain. Yeah, I'm not surprised at that whatsoever. He says, we haven't started Agatha all along yet, but hope to this weekend. The Rings of Power Season 2 continues to impress, and Sauron is just a force to be reckoned with. Not sure if you knew, but on Disney Plus there's a show called Hit Monkey. It's done by Marvel, and it's about a monkey who becomes a hitman. It stars Jason Sudeikis as another hitman who becomes partners with the monkey. Season 2 elevates it even more. There's 2 seasons of a show like that? No, I had not heard of it, but I don't know. I think if I'm ranking Jason Sudeikis shows that I should watch, I think Ted Lasso is still at the front of the list. I've yet to see a single episode of that show. But either way, all right. Fair enough. Hit Monkey on Disney Plus. 2 seasons. My goodness. All right. He says, Only Murders in the Building Season 4 has started off really well, and I cannot praise this show enough. This season we have Eva Longoria, Eugene Levy, and Zach Galifianakis. Oh, and Kumail Nanjiani as a guy who loves Christmas all year round. Yeah, you're just adding to the list of things that I have not watched, because I'm well aware of Only Murders in the Building, but no, absolutely have seen not a single episode of that show. All right. The list continues to expand, of course. He says, I haven't been to the cinema lately, so I have still not seen Beetlejuice. Aha! There we go. There's something I've seen. Okay, I have seen Beetlejuice. That was really good. All right, finally, something that I've seen that Wally hasn't. All right, here we go. Okay. He says, we might not even go and see Joker Folie à Deux as we are getting closer to the delivery date of our baby girl, and I don't want to leave my partner alone with Micah. Yeah, no, that's completely understandable. Joker Folie à Deux is not worth suspending the birth of your second child. Absolutely not. He says, I won't go any further into the discourse we've seen lately from the likes of THR regarding the DCU. I think you've said it all perfectly of late, and I, for one, have gotten sick of it all. From now on, if it hasn't come from James Gunn, I will ignore it. And that will do it for this week. Have a good one, Ray, and speak soon. Thank you, Wally Mustafa. Well, Wally, thank you as always for your feedback. But to that point about James Gunn and the DCU, he has actually not spoken directly about what we've heard from THR with respect to these rumors, but he has indeed made a statement, if you will. And this was in response to a question, because, people bombard him with questions about, hey, we heard about this, we heard about that. And what it was there's a book called We Three, a DC Comics book that was written, and I don't know who wrote this. Let's see, Grant Morrison, Frank Quitely, Jamie Grant. It's on the DC Black Label, and there's a foreword written by James Gunn. And this was posted from an account, Ian Aitken at Red Dragon 70 on Threads. And he said, I just finished reading We Three. What a dark wonder, beautiful artwork and great storytelling, but damn, it hits hard. The intro by @JamesGunn is perfect, and yeah, I understand why he wishes he could be me reading it for the first time. If you haven't read it, do so, but be ready because it will hurt. Well, James Gunn quoted this and said, I get asked to write a lot of forewords, and I always have to say no due to time commitments. But there was no way I could say no to Grant and Frank and We Three. I'll let you all know when the book is available. And so underneath this, an account by the name of Eric Oliveira.eo411 asked him, hey, James, Is that rumor about a Mr. Freeze project true? Now, I hadn't heard that rumor, but, the rumor mill and all manner of Scooper Madness, they go wild with this shit on YouTube and comment sections and elsewhere on social media. But Gunn responded to this, and his response is a catch-all that I absolutely reposted. Anthony reposted it. He actually tagged me and Brooklyn Batman in it. And yeah, here it is, Wally. James says, quote, I haven't heard that one, but there are a lot of rumors out there this week. Some of them are true, some are partially true, and some aren't true at all. If it's fun for you to follow the unknowns, follow them. But don't trust anything completely until you hear it from me or Peter, who's not online despite me seeing him tagged and stuff. End quote. So there you have it. We had a week full of Boris Kitt and Aaron Couch and THR and everybody just rumor after rumor. Oh, that this is confirmed. This casting has happened for Lanterns. This casting has happened for Supergirl. This is what they're talking about with this Deathstroke versus Bane movie. And here we go. All James did was he waited for an opportune moment to say, hey, one more time. Don't trust anything completely until you hear it from him or Peter Safran. Bottom line. And that is the position that I officially have and will officially take without a doubt. Because even if some of this stuff or all of this stuff turns out to be true, the fact of the matter is it is unconfirmed and can fall through the cracks, if you will, and not happen if, a deal collapses, if negotiations don't happen the way that they're supposed to, which is another reason why he won't comment on it, because it's a delicate period with respect to that, and there's no reason for him to possibly soil that with a public announcement. So all the fans that want to besiege him with questions and, hey, it's time for him to explain this, time for him to explain that. No, it's not. Just find whatever sliver of patience you probably don't have in that entitled body of yours, you damned fans, and just sit with it. Whatever. He's busy with Superman and Peacemaker Season 2, which is where his attention should be as far as the actual launching of the DCU, since it hasn't launched yet. How about that? But at any rate, thank you, all of you, as always, for the feedback. Greatly appreciated. Best of luck with respect to the family developments. Keep us posted with respect to that, and I will try and see if I can get even remotely caught up on this list with respect to everything I need to watch, good sir. All right, next up, we've got a pair of emails from Mr. Alex De Silva. The first one he sent on the 20th. Is that right? September 20th? Here we go. He says, hey, Ray, so things are not off to a great start for the Patriots. We got that Week 1 victory, but that was followed by 2 consecutive losses. This team insists on running the ball, and then when the QB makes the occasional throw, it's usually not caught. Can't make much forward progress up the field with a situation like that. I wish I could say that it's gotten better for you, Alex, but no, it hasn't. The Patriots lost again today. I believe the Niners beat them earlier today. So, sorry to hear that for you, good sir. He says, I know you don't play video games much anymore, but do you like sports games? Timeout. I don't play video games much anymore because of a timing issue, not because I don't like video games. But yes, I do like sports games, to answer your question. He says, I just recently got MLB The Show 24 for free, and I just started the career mode. Of course, I chose to play with the Red Sox organization. If you get the companion app on your phone, you can do a face scan and upload that to the game so your player looks just like you, and the results are creepily realistic. The player looks just like me. The game even has a massive list of audio bites for player names, so whenever I'm up at bat or I do something noteworthy, the announcers will literally say, and now here's Alex De Silva at the plate, and then talk about my stats, or if I'm fielding, they'll say something like ball hit right to De Silva and he makes the play, etc. It's so weird, but very immersive in a cool way. It would suck if a person playing this didn't have their name recognized in the audio database, though. Yeah, I don't know how many, there's got to be some variants. I mean, maybe a really, unique name, I don't know. But, yeah, I have to believe that they have the vast majority of them covered. But, yeah, that would suck, unfortunately, if somebody with a really supremely unique name couldn't hear theirs because it just didn't fit in the database. But hopefully it does. Hopefully that isn't a massive problem, to be honest with you. He said, on the flight back from Europe, I did a little double feature, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and The Boys in the Boat. Apes was good. May was actually quite a devious character, much more so than I was expecting, he said. That made her a very interesting person to watch. I would agree with that. The Boys in the Boat was good, he says. For anyone who doesn't know, it's a movie that came out last year about a crew team, aka a rowing team, that made it to the Olympics in the 1930s. It followed all the same standard beats of a sports movie and didn't really do anything new, but I guess if it ain't broke, I don't think I've heard of that movie, The Boys in the Boat. All right, fair enough. I hear you. He says, I recently rewatched The Dark Knight Rises, and while I don't think it's a terrible movie, it's definitely the weakest of the trilogy in my eyes. There are just too many scenes that focus on characters other than Batman himself for too much time. There's nothing wrong with checking in with the villains throughout a movie, but in this one, it feels like every other scene is another villain check-in, taking the spotlight way off of Batman. This issue is made even worse by the fact that Batman himself is taken out of commission in the middle of the movie. I wouldn't be surprised if, of the entire trilogy, this is the one with the least amount of Batman screen time. Oh, sure. Yeah, without question, because he's Batman an hour into Begins. I'd say about an hour, right? But that also has some really good setup leaning into it. And, of course, he's Batman for the entirety of The Dark Knight. So, yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't dislike the movie either, and I don't think it's terrible. I think it is a good movie. But, yeah, if my rankings for the trilogy, if I'm ranking the trilogy, literally goes in release order. Begins 1, Dark Knight 2, Dark Knight Rises 3. And you know what? I'm sure that's probably still controversial to some people out there who think The Dark Knight is the greatest DC movie ever made. And that's their business. It's all subjective. But I happen to believe that Begins is the pinnacle of Batman. And if it weren't for the next movie you're about to talk about, Batman Begins would still be the best live-action Batman movie made to date, in my subjective opinion. But no, you said, Alex, that you also rewatched 2022's The Batman, which you said you only saw in theaters once, 2 years ago. I liked it well enough, he says, but wasn't enamored when I first saw it. This time around, I liked it a lot more for some reason. There are often times where you watch a movie for the second time, and since you know what to expect and your sense of having expectations are gone, you're much more easily able to enjoy just the movie for what it is, and that's what happened this time around. This may be a bold statement, but I think this movie contains the best build-up to a Batman reveal that has ever been put on screen. The montage of different criminals looking into the dark and getting scared, the crescendo of the music, Batman himself emerging from the shadows, all of it comes together so well, and you're just dying for Batman to appear and save the guy from the hoodlums. It's so satisfying. I think the combat in this one is also better than the combat in the Dark Knight trilogy in general. Yes. 1000% agree? No, it's not a bold statement. I agree with you. Many others agree with you. The Batman, in my opinion, is the best Batman film made to date, the best Batman solo film made to date, no doubt. And yes, the fight choreography, vastly superior, because Christopher Nolan, incredible auteur, I mentioned him earlier in this show, one of the greatest auteurs of my lifetime, for sure, and of our lifetime. The one thing he can't do is fight choreography. It's the one weakness he has. His fight choreography is not good in any of the TDK films or any other films as well, right? It got better in Tenet, but it still wasn't that great, to be honest with you. Not compared to some other films where we see some really awesome fight choreography. The Batman I would include in that. The fight choreography in the Batman, vastly superior. Yes, no doubt about that. He says, the Riddler mystery and clues felt much more engaging to me this time around, probably as a result of being familiar with the story and it being easier to follow along with this time. For me, the biggest detriment to the movie is the runtime, because I really felt the length of the movie. I was enjoying it, but it reached a certain point where I was just ready for it to end already so I could move on with my day. Oh, okay, that's harsh. Other than that, I'm happy to report pretty much everything about this movie worked for me the second time around. It doesn't quite surpass The Dark Knight as my favorite Batman movie, but it honestly might be tied with Batman Begins for that second place spot. I definitely can't blame you, he says, for having this as your number one, because there really is a lot to like here. I'm very much looking forward to The Penguin now, and I'm really glad I gave this movie another shot. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the feelings that you have about the Batman kind of emblematic of the feelings I first had about Man of Steel. And that was only because that first viewing I experienced what I like to call, or it actually died. It's not what I like to call, but it's cognitive dissonance. When you are, I've talked about this before, when you grow up with the Christopher Reeve films, and that is your classical interpretation of Superman, and then you are confronted with Man of Steel, yeah, your brain is getting used to the idea of Superman being portrayed in a very different light than you're used to seeing him in. And there are people still over a decade later that can't grapple with this, that struggle with this, that cannot possibly accept what they see from Superman and Man of Steel. But for me, all it took was a second viewing, and every time I have watched Man of Steel, it has improved. Every time. It is a absolutely phenomenal film. And for me, I don't mind the runtime. I mean, the runtime of that movie is 220. I certainly don't mind the runtime of the Batman. The Batman is nearly 3 hours long, but it's such an epic crime drama, and it's just so much intrigue and so much character development, and just the setting, the mood, the sounds. Michael Giacchino's magnum opus score, in my opinion. There's just so much to enjoy about that film. It does not feel like 3 hours to me. Absolutely does not. I did not feel the runtime of the movie. I did not feel the length of the movie at all, Alex. And I've watched that movie several times. I've never felt the length of that movie, and I don't think I will. But again, Batman is my favorite superhero of all time. So, I'm just a bit biased in that regard, understandably so, because bias is not a bad word, not for us as fans. So here we go, on to his Next Generation watch update for this email. He said that for that particular week, he watched Where Silence Has Lease. He says the fact that Worf has these intense arena matches every day as exercise is crazy and gives good insight into Klingon culture. All right, but how about this next sentence? He says, all right, I'm officially tired of Pulaski acting like Data isn't alive. He's an android, he's part human, no need to act so shocked all the time. Get with the program, lady, dang. Yeah, you're only 2 episodes into the season, Alex. Just grin and bear it. It's not going to go away. It's going to be there for the whole damned season. But at any rate, he says, was the whole point of this episode just for the Nagilum thing to run his experiment? I'm curious if he ever comes back. He had a very interesting design. Do you know the whole annoying orange meme? That's what Nagilum looks like. Yes, I do know what meme you're talking about. And yes, I agree, he does kind of look like that. I will confirm or deny later if you want me to tell you that he comes back or not, but right now I will just remain silent with respect to it. But yeah, it essentially was just for him to run his experiment, if you will. So yeah, the ending of the episode always used to confuse me when I was younger. Then as I got older, I was like, okay, I kind of get it, but it's still just kind of a weird episode all the way through, to be honest with you. A weird human experiment episode. So yeah, it is what it is. Like I said, we're getting through that second season. There's some gems here. You haven't hit any yet, but there's some gems in the second season. But we're just moving forward, if you will. Can't wait to hear your thoughts on the next episode, Elementary Dear Data. You said, I'm gonna go out on a limb rather, and guess that Picard's alter ego is gonna make an appearance in this one. His alter ego? Interesting. I wonder what he means with respect to that. But here, let's get to his second email that he sent about a week after that on the 27th. Alex said, hey Ray, are you a fan of sports docuseries? Did you hear about the Face Off Inside the NHL docuseries that's coming out on Amazon Prime on October 4th? Apparently, it's going to cover a bunch of different players and their experiences in the NHL. 2 players from the Bruins are going to be featured across the 6 episodes, so I'm looking forward to giving it a watch, especially with hockey season right around the corner. I'm not against docuseries. I'm not against sports documentaries at all. The last really good one that I watched was a hockey one. It was Undisputed. I think it was the Undisputed, Unrivaled. It was the documentary that ESPN did a year or so ago about the rivalry between the Red Wings and the Avalanche in the early to mid to late 90s, going into the early 2000s, which was just the fiercest hockey rivalry I've ever seen, and just all the drama and everything that happened. And I've warned people. I think I even mentioned this back in the day on this show, maybe. But I warned people that if you ever watch that documentary, which I need to confirm, is it Undisputed or is it Unrivaled? It's Unrivaled, yes, an ESPN documentary, Unrivaled. But I will warn people that if you're going to watch it, watch the ESPN Plus version. ESPN Plus as an app is largely useless because you do not get access to actual live sports on ESPN. It's a bullshit app, to be very honest with you. However, the full Unrivaled documentary between the Red Wings and the Avs is there, and it's the whole thing. When they aired it on ESPN, they cut it down to an hour, and they cut like so much out, and they focused the documentary primarily on the Red Wings. And don't get me wrong, I'm a Wings fan, and that was cool, but I wanted to see the entire story because I knew there were other aspects of the story between them and the Avalanche that weren't getting covered. The documentary, the full version of it on ESPN Plus, is 2 hours and 7 minutes long, and it's the whole story. Like everything, I was learning things I didn't know. Like I didn't know that Adam Foote, the day that Quebec was announced to be moving to Colorado, accidentally wore a Colorado Rockies jersey to the press conference, not knowing that was the case. And on top of that, I also didn't know that the day that Patrick Waugh played his last game for the Montreal Canadiens, which was the Wings came to town that night. They were playing against them. Patrick Waugh had coffee with Mike Vernon in a cafe that the afternoon, before the game, and told him that he thought it was going to be his last game. He thought he was going to leave Montreal, and sure enough, the Wings shell him for 9 goals. They end up winning the game 11-1, and he tells Mario Tremblay that he'll never play for them again. He got traded to Colorado, made our lives a living hell by leading them to the Stanley Cup, and the whole Claude Lemieux thing and everything. It's a fantastic documentary. It is outstanding. It's the last sports documentary that I really watched, and I would very, very much recommend it for any hockey fans, anybody that is curious, anybody that remembers how bloody and how brutal and how angry that rivalry was. And there are some people on either sides, Chris Draper in particular, that are still pissed, that are still mad, that will not shake Claude Lemieux's hand whatsoever. So, yeah, it's great. It's really great. But yes, I do like sports docuseries. I am curious about that now. I hadn't heard about Face Off, but I am curious about that, so I'll have to look that up at some point on Amazon Prime. Add that to the list. All right. Alex says, so apparently Rey's theme has become the first Star Wars song played in outer space. An astronaut played the theme on violin up there, which is pretty cool. There's your bit of useless trivia for the day. I love that, though, because I was just talking at work the other day about how, say whatever we will about the Star Wars movies, one of the things that's kind of universal that I think all of us, for the large part, can agree is that the music is fantastic. John Williams scores throughout all 9 of the films that he composed. Absolutely outstanding. And the music for Rogue One and Solo are also good, but those are different composers. John Powell and Michael Giacchino. Giacchino did Rogue One. John Powell, with a bit of John Williams' assistance, also did Solo, because he used some of Williams' themes in that particular film as well. But the fact that all of the John Williams Star Wars compositions are outstanding, and I love that the first one played in space is from the sequel trilogy, the somewhat maligned sequel trilogy, if you will. Fantastic. Rey's theme is also really good. I mean, it's all good. It's all fantastic. Are there any bad movements? No, there are not, subjectively speaking. I've yet to meet a human that feels that way about John Williams' music, however they feel about the films themselves. But either way, Alex says, I've seen the first 2 episodes of Agatha all along. The first episode was so bad. They were pushing this gimmick that got old very fast and did not need to last for the entire episode. Looking back, that episode feels like a waste of time and could have been much better encapsulated as a 10 to 15 minute segment rather than taking up the full runtime. The second episode, though, was much, much better, as it's in the second episode that the story truly begins and the main cast of characters is introduced. I fully understand why they dropped the first 2 episodes together, because if all I had to go off was the first episode, I don't know if I'd even want to come back the following week for episode 2. Dropping both episodes was the right move, as I'm actually now looking forward to episode 3. Well, all that tells me, Alex, is I'm probably going to thoroughly enjoy episode 1. And then I'm going to look at episode 2 and be like, okay, that was good as well. But whatever they did, whatever gimmick, I have a feeling I know what it is without, and I have not watched it yet. But I just have this feeling, especially based on, the gimmick that was used for a number of episodes in WandaVision. I have a feeling it's something similar to that. But we'll see. We'll find out. I'm going to try to watch those here in the next couple of days or so. I got to figure that out. But all right, fair enough. Okay, so he did say, I also saw the premiere of The Penguin. Pretty great all around, great writing, great acting, just an altogether well-composed product. The Penguin neatly fills the role of Sunday Night HBO that the House of the Dragon just recently left. Yeah, and that's really exciting, because if we're in for that type of quality, which we certainly are based on that pilot, then yeah, we're in for a classic bit of DC show here, for sure. He says, since we're in the fall season, I decided to watch some horror movies, specifically a movie series that absolutely terrified me as a kid, the Child's Play trilogy. Watching it back now, it's not scary at all, and I just have to laugh at the ridiculousness of the set pieces. But as a child, the idea of Chucky is no laughing matter. When you're a kid, you feel that Chucky could actually take you out since he's about your size. When I was a kid, I would avoid dark spaces and corners since I'd always be scared that Chucky was lurking there waiting for me. Yeah, I feel you on that. I have not watched any of the Child's Play movies, but I will tell you that a series that I kind of went through a similar arc with, and it's still crazy that I've seen all these movies. If you've ever heard of the Critters franchise, the Critters movies, and funny enough, I just saw recently that Arrow Video, which I haven't gotten any of their stuff yet, but They've got some releases coming out here, like in the fall, that I'm very interested in. Like, there's a 4K version of Demolition Man that they're going to be coming out with. It's like, okay, no, that absolutely has my interest. But they're also coming out with a 4-movie Critters box set. And I've seen all 4 of those movies. And if you're not familiar with the Critters, they're these little angry fur balls, these evil-looking fur balls that are carnivores, obviously, and they eat everything in sight. And I remember as a kid, they would show the second movie a ton on like Channel 20 in Detroit. And I would watch it like all the time because it was just weird science fiction. And I watched a lot of weird science fiction when I was a kid. And, I come to get older, the Sci-Fi Channel comes out. Even before the Sci-Fi Channel, I discovered pay-per-view was a new thing at my grandma's house. And I discovered, based on looking at the pay-per-view preview channel, that there was a Critters 4. And I'm like, Critters 4? And I asked my uncle Dave, to like buy that for me on pay-per-view. And he did, and I watched it. And funny enough, it's the first movie I've ever seen Angela Bassett or Brad Dourif in. Hilariously enough, Brad Dourif, there's your Child's Play connection, right? But yeah, I then later, through the Sci-Fi Channel, discovered that there was a first Critters movie and a third Critters movie. And when I was a kid, the Critters were they're scary. I would still watch the movies, but they were definitely scary. Like these little fur balls that would just eat everyone and everything in sight. It's like, oh, it's really chilling. And then I remember they did a marathon on Sci-Fi when I was older, when I was in high school. And I rewatched it. And I watched the first movie and discovered that the premise behind the Critters is that they're escaped criminals that like escaped an intergalactic lockup and stole a spaceship and flew to Earth. It's like, what? Seriously? That's why the bounty hunters were chasing them? Because they're criminals and they just happen to land on a planet full of humans that they'll eat? Okay. And yeah, it's silly and goofy and ridiculous, and more than likely, I'm probably going to buy the damn box set from Arrow Video. More than likely. But still, same thing. As a kid, they were scary and creepy. As an adult, goofy and silly. Absolutely goofy and silly, no doubt about it. But I feel you on that one. I don't know if I'll ever watch the Child's Play movies. Maybe. But I have some other ideas for Halloween, because there's some other Halloween movies or movies that have been suggested to me for Halloween that I think I'm going to watch, in addition to a couple of staples that I would also like to watch as well. So we'll see about that. But here we go into TNG watch update for this email. He said he watched 2 episodes of TNG. First up, as he mentioned before, Elementary Dear Data. Alex asks, how big is the holodeck? I thought it was just one room. Are there spatial limits to the place? This episode made it almost feel like it was a whole different dimension. Well, yeah, because it moves, right? Like, as you move through the holodeck, like, the boundaries and everything will move, like, in space, right? And it doesn't seem like, like, the walls are always there, but as you're walking, the scenery is changing. The scenery is moving based on how you're walking. So it is still just one room. I mean, one big-ass room, but, like, everything is moving as you were moving through it in that regard. So that's the best way that I could describe it, to be honest with you, from a dimensional perspective. He said, I like the concept of a rogue AI who takes the form of a master criminal. Speaks into the fears a lot of people have in today's society. Yeah, the whole Moriarty problem kind of is a little more relevant today than it was back in 1988. He says, I also like how the climax of this episode was just a calm conversation in which Picard convinces the program to stand down. No big action scene, no dramatic punches thrown or phasers fired, just a tranquil appeal to reason that cools things down. Yeah, no, definitely a difference. And it also speaks to the character of Jean-Luc Picard, because he is very much a diplomat, and that's what he does, right? I mean, he'll go to war and he'll fire upon the invading ship or the enemy if necessary, but he is the diplomat. He does the negotiations. He tries to allow cooler heads to prevail, if you will. He's absolutely a negotiator and a tactician in that regard. So yeah, definitely speaks to his character with that. Elementary Dear Data is one of the stronger season 2 episodes. It is. I don't know if it's as strong as a few of the other ones that you're going to run into, but it is a stronger one. Certainly stronger than the one you watched before this, where Silence Has Lease. But how about the next one? The Outrageous Okana, he says. This was probably the first directly Han Solo-inspired character we've seen in Star Trek so far. Yeah, hard to argue with that, Alex, for sure. He says, I recognize the first girl that Okana seduces, the one from the transporter room, but I can't for the life of me place where she's from. Do you know what she's been in off the top of your mind? Yeah, I know exactly who it is. That's Terry Hatcher. Yeah, the Terry Hatcher from Desperate Housewives and from Lois and Clark. The Adventures of Lois and Clark. She was Lois Lane. Yeah, you know her. You absolutely know her. And that is her from the transporter room. A very young Terry Hatcher. Yes, absolutely. She's been in Star Trek. Get ready for more of that. You're going to see some more characters. You're going to see some more names, some more people that you know from elsewhere that are going to pop up in this show. There's a lot. It's easier at this point, Alex, for me to tell people who hasn't been in Star Trek than for me to tell you who has been in Star Trek. And this is just season 2 of TNG in 1988. It's going to go even deeper and more expansive going forward. But yes, that was Terry Hatcher, a very young Terry Hatcher that you saw in that episode. Absolutely. He says, the sequence where Data's learning humor and trying it out on Guinan and the other crew members was pretty funny. Moments like this make him pretty endearing to the audience. No idea how Pulaski could dislike this guy. Yeah, you're starting to see very early on here why Dr. Pulaski was not necessarily a long-for-this-world character with respect to the show. That's not really a spoiler, Alex, because obviously in 7 seasons of this show, if you've seen any of the cover art and whatnot, you know that Dr. Crusher at some point returns, right? So, yeah, it's not a surprise. Dr. Pulaski is this season and this season only. So, we're just going to grin and bear it. We are. She has some moments here and there, but we're going to largely grin and bear it. No doubt about that. He says next episode is loud as a whisper, and forgive me. I mean, there's so many episodes of the show. Oh, okay. Yep, the Reva episode. I got it. I couldn't immediately recall exactly which episode this was, but now I know the Reva episode. Oh, that'll be interesting. That'll be an interesting one to hear your thoughts on, Alex. But of course, he says, live long and prosper. Can't wait to hear more of your feedback, Alex. Take care. Thank you, as always. We'll see how your Patriots fare. And also, I would like to thank your Red Sox, if you will, for taking down, I think the Twins recently, and also some other opponents that were in our way as the Tigers made their meteoric rise into that wild card spot. We are going to be playing the Houston Astros in the first wild card series on Tuesday. That is insane to me that the Tigers are in the playoffs. This team was 55-63 at one point, and they rattled off 33 wins, 33-13, I think was what they finished the season with. Insane, absolutely insane finish to the season, and it was a combination of their meteoric rise and the absolute collapse of the Minnesota Twins, and a little bit the Kansas City Royals as well, although they are going to go to Baltimore and play the Orioles in the wild card as well, so they made it. It's crazy how 3 teams from the Central made the play. I would not have guessed that at all, that 3 teams in the AL Central would make the playoffs. Would not, and definitely wouldn't have thought that we would have been one of them. Man, amazing time for Detroit sports. Between that and the Lions playing on Monday night tomorrow, hopefully they beat the damn Seahawks. As of the time of me recording this, but we'll see. But thank you as always, Alex, for the feedback. Greatly appreciated. Good sir. And finally, we will end this week's Flight Chat with an email from Jared Cardos titled Penguin, Agatha, and the Latest Flight Cast. He sent this just yesterday, so this is a brand new one. This is a very recent email, if you will. We're almost through our catch-up. So he says, hey, Ray, hope you're doing well. Sorry for being a bit absent in terms of my emails of late, but real-world stuff made that harder to do. Trust me, Jared, I understand that. That also impacts me with respect to this show and podcasting in general. He says, while a lot has happened that is probably too old to talk about at this point, I do want to address one thing you specifically asked in the last Flight Chat that I was a part of, and that's the DC Universe Infinite questions. He says the absolute DC comics will absolutely be on DC Universe Infinite, though it likely won't be on the same time as it's published in print or in digital booksellers. They will occasionally post the first issues of new series or events like Absolute Power or Plastic Man No More on the same day, as well as their seasonal anthology books. They'll occasionally release whole series on the platform same day, often video game tie-ins like Batman Fortnite, Gotham Knights, Multiverses, etc., and some non-video game ones like Batman Santa Claus. Yes, that was a real thing, but it's the exception rather than the rule. The normal tier of DC Universe Infinite has a 6-month gap between when books are published and when they're put out on DC Universe Infinite, and the Ultra tier has a 1-month gap. He says the Ultra tier is, as you can guess, more expensive and only bought annually, but has that shorter gap, and it has a lot of non-superhero Vertigo books exclusive to the tier, with books you might know from other adaptations like Y the Last Man, Preacher, iZombie, as well as many others that I never even heard of before. The Ultra tier even has a few superhero books that for some reason have always stayed in there, like Batman the Killing Joke, Batman 3 Jokers, and Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth. The Ultra tier also has digital versions of trade paperbacks of both monthly comics collected together and fully original works. Alright, fair enough. He says, I hope I don't sound like I'm marketing the Ultra tier and explaining the differences, because I do think that if you want to take a look at the superhero side of DC's publishing and don't mind a 6-month gap in between publishing, then the regular tier of DC Universe Infinite works perfectly well, but both do offer a lot of value. Yeah, I have looked it up, Jared, and you're right, that the price difference is hefty, and like you said, annual instead of monthly, but yeah, something to consider in the not-too-distant future, no doubt about that. Thank you for the information. He says, now on to newer things, starting with your most recent podcast. With the Lanterns casting, I agree that I'm not going to put everything on these cast news for Lanterns until Gunn confirms it, and I get the feeling that we won't get something from him until both Hal and John are cast. That said, from what I heard, I get the impression that the thought there is that there shouldn't be any announcements about things like Lanterns or Supergirl, since it's important that Superman is successful first. And sure, that movie is a cornerstone and necessary for the DCU to work, but I think what will also be important for the DCU to work is for there to be consistent stories coming out. We saw this to a certain degree with the Aquaman movies. The sequel was subjectively of a similar quality as the first movie, but reactions were more tepid, arguably because it was about 5 years between movies. There also seemed to be a feeling from you in the episode that we shouldn't be asking Gunn to do stuff for Supergirl or Lanterns because he's working on Superman, Peacemaker, and to some extent Creature Commandos, but that ignores that these shows and movies already have other creators picked by Gunn to work on them. So yeah, Superman is key for this to work, but so is having more things in the works to come out after, like Supergirl and Lanterns. Jared, I get that, but the issue that I have with respect to all of it is the fan demand. Because what happens is, we're in a period where, just like we had with the DCEU, THR, Deadline, Variety, Scoober Madness as well, puts out all these stories and puts out all these rumors, right? And the problem is that two things are happening. Like I said in the episode, you have people that want Gunn to acknowledge all of this and confirm it and feel like it's his job to do so, and no, it's not. His job is to launch the DCU, because the DCU has not launched yet, Jared. We have not seen a single piece of content. All we have seen is one trailer for Creature Commandos. That is it as far as official content. Everything else has been set photos. We still do not have a teaser or a trailer for Superman. We have nothing for Peacemaker Season 2 because that's in production. So that's the first thing, is this idea that we're demanding an answer from him for all these other rumors. That's not his priority. His priority is Superman, Peacemaker Season 2, Creature Commandos, the actual launch of the DCU proper as a universe. The other problem is that you have the fans that are saying, well, he's spreading himself too thin. And Brooklyn Batman said this, right? This is the thing that Brooklyn Batman did mention, where he said, I just hope that he's not spreading himself too thin. And my thing is, we can't say that he is, because he didn't confirm any of this. He didn't announce any of this. He's not leaking this to THR like, oh, here's what my plan is. Go ahead and put that out there. No, his focus is where it should be. And to me, so the concerns that people have, like, oh, well, this is just going to be another slate. And remember what happened when the DCEU tried to slate that. My whole concern here is with fan demands, Jared. You know how unruly fans are. You know how unreasonable and irrational fans are. You know how impatient fans are. And so that's where my feeling comes from. As far as official announcements and whatnot, do we really want to fall into another trap like we did with the DCEU, where all these things get announced and then something gets upheaved and everything goes to the wayside? I'm still waiting on a Cyborg movie. Still waiting on the Steven Spielberg Black Hats movie or whatever that was, Black Hawks, right? You know, still waiting on. Let's see, that we waited however many years for the Flash movie to happen, right? Like, there was so much dysfunction, there was so much chaos. And I'm not saying that there's going to be more of that with the DCU, but what I am saying is, can we launch the damn franchise first? Before we're talking about everything going forward? Can we see how Superman does? Can we see how this franchise starts? Can it get off to a healthy enough start that anything else that has been bandied about by THR in the past week actually has a legitimate shot of seeing the light of day? Can we do that? How's about that? I get what you're saying, in terms of having more things in the works. But remember, James Gunn has already told us 8 to 10 year plan, and he's already given us a list of projects, Lanterns and Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and a number of other things, right? He's already given us a list of projects to look forward to. Why is that not enough, Jared? Why is that not enough to satisfy what you're talking about in terms of having more things in the works to come out after? He's clearly got that, and he will release that schedule when he sees fit, after the damn franchise has actually launched. That's all I'm saying, Jared, is the fans are so impatient. And I want to talk about it. They just want to hang off of everything that THR tells them, right? Oh, this Deathstroke versus Bang movie. We haven't heard shit about that. No one has said anything about that. James Gunn hasn't said anything about that. Peter Safran hasn't said anything about that. Why are we just skipping over Batman Brave and the Bold? Why are we skipping over Paradise Lost? Why are we skipping over the Swamp Thing movie that we were all excited a year or so ago might have been done by James Mangold? Huh? Why are we skipping over things that James Gunn has actually told us to worry about, things that James Gunn hasn't confirmed for us? That's what I don't understand. And that's why when it comes to new stuff being announced, no. Gunn gave us enough of a primer a couple of years ago when he announced what was going to be in Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. When he told us all the projects that were going to be in that should be enough for us. If it isn't, then you got a patience issue. And I know fans are impatient in general, but that's what my problem with these other announcements are, Jared. That's where my issue comes into play. We already know what things are in the works to come out after if Superman succeeds, right? And that is the if. That is the crux of it, right? If Superman succeeds, then we already know where he's going. He told us. We don't need all this other extra noise from THR and Deadline and Variety. That's all I'm saying with respect to that. So I hope that sufficiently answers that particular concern. Jared says, as for the Thunderbolts trailer, it looks promising, he says. What I think is interesting about this movie is that it offers something that very few of these movies have offered, and that's an air of mystery. Maybe it's just me and having read a lot of superhero stuff, but I go into a lot of these movies with at least a vague idea of how they will go, and while they're typically good in its execution, I have to say the prospect of seeing one of these movies where I'm not fully sure what's going to happen is a bit exciting. Throw in some smaller characters getting their big moments to shine and some cool action, and if they keep this air of mystery around it until release, I think this could be a fun experience. Potentially. Most certainly it does. I wasn't necessarily thinking about the mystery aspect of it, because, we'll find out, who the villain is and what the machinations are and what the plan is and what they've got to do to save the day, whatever that is. But yeah, the mystery aspect of it, yes, that could be very intriguing. It definitely could be something to watch out for because, yeah, I don't know that that's really a genre that we see a whole lot of with respect to these superhero films. So yeah, that could be very intriguing indeed. And he says, and that psycho jump scare that I mentioned in the most recent Flightcast episode is funny, but definitely shows the cons of digital and streaming content. What I want to know, outside of the whole you couldn't wait a minute for the credits thing, is why recommend The Big Bang Theory of all things? Not even saying it as a quality thing, but surely there are other classic or suspense movies or shows on Apple TV Plus to recommend instead. That's a marketing decision. Somebody that, couldn't care less about how the content connects to one another on the app probably goes, hey, if they're a nerd, or if they're watching a really old Hitchcock movie, they must be a nerd. And if they're a nerd, let's throw them to the nerd show that we have 12 seasons of. More than likely. Some silly, lazy shit like that, if I had to venture a guess. But yeah, it's unfortunate, if you will. It's not a great thing. Not a great thing at all. He says, now on to the new releases, starting with The Penguin. It was definitely a strong opening pilot, he says. Colin Farrell continues to deliver a solid performance as Oswald Cobb. Oh, here we go. He says, to get it out of the way, I did find the name change to be a bit of an odd choice, since I don't think Cobblepot is that ridiculous a name, especially given his family history that's typical in the comics. But between what we've seen in the pilot and what they've hinted in terms of flashbacks, I think I'm starting to get the reasoning, even if I don't think it was that necessary. Anyway, Farrell was great in this, as was Kristen Milioti as Sophia Falcone. She's going to be really interesting to watch because it's hard to tell if she actually believes in Oz's lies or if she's just playing along to play him. I don't know, man. I think it's the latter. I really do think it's the latter. And with her past in Arkham, he says, and as the Hangman in the air, we just don't know how dangerous she'll truly be, just that she is. The MVP of this pilot has to be Victor, though. Oh, interesting. Dude started trying to steal Oz's hubcaps. Jason Todd reference, maybe? That's what Scott said on DC TV Squadcast. and ended up being able to pull a scheme to make himself Oz's second in command, all with like 2 days of no sleep. I hope the kid got to get some sleep after his burger at the end. All in all, a really solid opening, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes, even outside of what it might hint at for what will come in the next Batman movie. Yeah, I will still disagree a bit about the MVP. I mean, I hear you on Victor, but I mean, Sophia, like, she kind of stole the show for me, definitely, in the pilot episode, and I am very intrigued with how she goes for the rest of this series, no doubt about it. But, I mean, really, I can't complain about any of the acting performances. All of them were strong, including Victor. So, yeah, it'll be very intriguing to see exactly where this show goes and how it picks up, and the gap that it bridges between the Batman and the Batman Part 2, you know, when that begins filming next year. So, no doubt about it. And then finally, he says, then there was the 2-episode premiere of Agatha All Along, which was a pleasant surprise. More than anything else, this was the show that when announced, my immediate reaction was, really? Agatha worked well enough in WandaVision, but I wasn't sure she could carry a whole show. But from this pilot, it seems to be working. It was fun to see it start out close to WandaVision style, then quickly break out into its own, and the supporting cast are promising, especially the character only known right now as Teen, who I'm pretty sure is going to be a fairly big character in the comics and play a role going forward. Here's hoping it continues to be entertaining. Since this became a bit longer, and I'm sure you have a collection of emails to catch up on, I'll leave it here. Looking forward to your next episodes. Well, thank you, Jared. I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the thoughtfulness with respect to that. You know, the thing with Agatha All Along, I will say this. You know, Catherine Hahn, I think, definitely is a strong enough actress to carry a show. And the way that she played Agatha in WandaVision, I was like, okay, no, she's a strong enough antagonist that them making a spinoff, I really never questioned it, to be honest with you. And I thought that WandaVision did well enough, and I thought that the whole thing about Agatha All Along, I thought that was a big enough marketing play that's like, okay, yeah, they're going to do a spinoff on this, and I'll totally watch it. I'm very curious to see how it goes. And the trailer, truthfully, gave me like some hope. I was like, wow, this actually really looks good. And I am looking forward to watching it. I will try and get caught up on it this week, maybe get some thoughts about it on Patreon, if you will. Just the list. You know how the list goes in that regard. And I've belabored it and talked about it enough to this point, but definitely I will try and see it very soon here. But thank you, as always, for the feedback, Jared. Greatly appreciate it. Looking forward to more, good sir. And that is going to do it for this particular episode of Flight Chat. Getting caught up on the email feedback. Thank you so much for your feedback. Thank you so much for listening to this show. Thank you to John. Thank you to Anthony Dorsey. Thank you to Alex De Silva, Wally Mustafa, Jared Cardos, everybody that sent in emails for this particular week. Always greatly appreciated. If anybody else wishes to join the feedback circle, that I will try to get back to doing on a weekly basis, if you will, but at the very least will be every other week, if not weekly. You know where to find me on Threads at the FlightCast, on Instagram at the FlightCast. There's the FlightCast Facebook page, and of course I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, have a great week, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.